What is going on, guys? Welcome. Welcome to Free Speech Friday. Welcome to the party. Thanks for making it. Thanks for waiting. Sorry that we're a little late tonight. Was off at a podcast with a homie. And we just got a little too into it. We got a little ahead of ourselves. So we're a little late. But we're here, and we've got a heck of a show. Gigi's really excited because she just ate dinner. Because we just rushed home, fed Gigi the chicken, and got ready to go. And I hope that you're caught up on what we talked about on our last Free Speech Friday and what Candace has been talking about Charlie Kirk, the Moon Cult, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you aren't, don't worry. We'll give you a little bit of backstory tonight, and we'll fill in the gaps. But tonight we're going to go on a long detour around some crazy history of CIA lore that is little known, but is, I think, one of the biggest stories in CIA history. You're going to have to tell me by the end of this. And the point of doing it is not like, this is not going to solve the Charlie Kirk assassination or anything like that. But it is related in a really interesting way, in a contextual way. Because I think one thing that people, myself included, are slowly gaining an awareness of is what TPUSA actually was. Because we all know what TPUSA says they are and what TPUSA was apparently meant to be. I think we all understand what Charlie envisioned TPUSA being, more or less. But what did the donors, what did the power players, what did the string pullers actually intend for TPUSA to be? What was TPUSA behind the curtain? You know, because for example, like we live in America, we have a president, we have a government, and we're told that that's America. That's how it works. Commander in chief, he's in charge. But we all know that that's not actually how it works. That's not actually who's in charge. That's a puppet. That's a facade. That's a story, right? And so the question is, like, how does it actually work behind the scenes? What are we actually here for? What's the government actually doing? And that's the context that we're about to kind of paint around the edges of Turning Point USA and potentially come to understand a big piece of the deep state machine, of the money, where it comes from, how it gets moved, and how you identify a person or organization or company or operation that might be associated with this deep state money, with the plan. So we're going to get into all that in just a second. But first, real quick, welcome and thanks for being here. You've made it to Free Speech Friday. If you're new here, we've got Twitch chat on the screen over here. And we've also got YouTube live right now. If you're giving super chats on YouTube, I see a couple of you homies. I see Wildflower just gave a big super chat. I am keeping track of the supers on YouTube, and we will go through all of those at the end. Thank you. I really do appreciate that. That support means a lot. That being said, your support just by being here, liking the video, paying attention, talking about it, leaving fun chats in the chat, that means a lot too. And so if, don't feel pressured to give money in the supers by any means. Just having you here is awesome. And I very much appreciate it. The documents that we're going to go over tonight are extensive, and they're going to take more than one show to get into the whole storyline. And if you've been here for a long time, you've actually encountered pieces of these documents way back when your boy had long hair. So if you remember all the way back to the original time we covered these documents, you're a fucking legend. And we have a way bigger piece of this puzzle now that we're looking at the Moon Cult and at Korea and at maybe where these funds were all going, which is a crazy full circle for me. Anyways, so I think we're about ready to get started. I don't think we need to dawdle around and do a bunch of housekeeping. I think we're just going to dive right into this because it's late and I've been rushing around and I'm going to get hungry before too long. So let's just get right into it. And tonight, we're going to have to kind of weave our story a little bit. I'm going to do my best to put it all together in a way that the connections actually make sense and are apparent, because this is inherently a very complicated topic and a complicated episode. This is interesting that it wants to share it that way. I'm going to have to reset my screen capture. 1 minute. Cool. So, Candace introduced us to Reverend Sun Myung Moon. Grainy picture of him. This Korean phenomenon that plays a strange role in the story of the Falkirk Center, of Liberty University, and of American politics at large, actually. And your boy has been digging deeply into Sun Myung Moon because this piqued the shit out of my interest. And it's becoming more and more apparent that there's something here. And I'm just going to present to you what I know, what I've found, just present you the facts, and you can make up your own mind. This episode will inherently involve very overt documentation that is, I think, very concrete. And it will also involve very tinfoily, like a moment. It'll involve documents that you're going to have to make up your own mind about their validity. And when we get to them, I'll tell you a bit about where they come from. And it's going to take a few episodes to really dig out all the validity and all the corroboration that I've done, because I've been trying to corroborate this story for 3 years, and I just keep finding more pieces that seem to add up. But first, before we get into the meat of our story, I want to add a little bit more color to Candace's story and to Sun Myung Moon, because I think that most Americans have no idea how important Mr. Moon is. I think that most of us have no idea just how ingrained in our political system this dude became. And while we're reading through this, I want you to just listen for things that remind you of Turning Point USA. Okay? Not everything will remind you of that, but there's certain things about this that I think are going to remind you an awful lot of Turning Point USA. And the connection that I'm going to really highlight here is the connection between Sun Myung Moon and George H.W. Bush. And just a reminder, if you weren't here before when I explained the viewer that you're seeing here, this is my own note-taking app, my own version of Webb, where I can highlight. And so when you see documents in this format here, these are documents that are just the transcribed version of an article that allows me to highlight, okay? So I'll try to switch back and forth a few times so you can see what's what. But the highlighting is super useful so we can tell what we're looking at. So through the early 80s, while Bush served as vice president, Moon operatives were building ties with the new Right Flying Hill staffers to junta-ruled El Salvador and supporting the Nicaraguan Contras' fight against the Sandinista government. Moon is a Korean man born in North Korea, then moved to South Korea, then founded this religious organization in Japan that just seemed to have all of this money, like an endless supply of money. And he came over to the States, I think in the 70s, if I'm not misremembering, and immediately just starts buying up businesses like crazy, starts buying political favors, starts buying influence. And no one can really figure out where all the money's coming from. But he's getting close with government operations. He's literally helping with the Iran-Contra affair. Many Moon organizations helped in many different ways with the actual smuggling of drugs and guns and people down in Central America for Iran-Contra. A Moon group, the Confederation of Associations for the Unification of the Societies of the Americas, CAUSA, contributed $500,000 to Dolan's Conservative Alliance in the early 1980s. We're trying to combat communism, and we're trying to uphold the traditional Judeo-Christian values. There's that word again, all the way back in the 80s. And one key piece that's going to be a little tricky to pick out here, but it is laced throughout, and I'll point it out later, is the Judeo-Christian part. The Judeo part is, where is this Judeo-Christian values alignment coming out of Japan and Korea? Why do dudes in Japan and Korea give a shit about Judeo-Christian values? And when we get to where the money's coming from, you might notice a thing. 4 years after leaving the White House, in 1996, Bush traveled to Buenos Aires for the opening of Moon's pan-Latin American newspaper, Tiempos del Mundo, and according to the Washington Post, received $100,000 for his trouble. Then he accompanied Moon to Uruguay to help open a seminary. His son Neil received $1 million from a Moon Foundation for an educational company. I'm going to give you several examples of how Bush was personally invested in Moon's success as a political operative, in a way that almost seems weird, like as though Bush had a reason to want Moon to succeed beyond Bush's own personal political agendas and interests. The Houston Chronicles in 2006 obtained evidence that Moon's Washington Times Foundation had contributed $1 million to Bush's presidential library, using the Greater Houston Community Foundation as a conduit. Now we're going to just slide up here to this article, which is even crazier. Reverend Moon, cult leader, CIA asset, and Bush family friend. CIA asset. Let me quickly take a scroll past the note Trump and Moon. That is a thing. And scroll up to past Uruguay and Moon, past Moon and Iran-Contra, Ronald Reagan and the Moonies. No, it's down here. My notes about the KCIA and the CIA. Boom. This is the critical note right here. According to a February 1963 American CIA report, the Unification Church was organized by retired Brigadier General Kim Jong-pil, the founder and first director of the South Korean CIA, the KCIA. Kim Jong-pil, a relative of Park Chung-hee, an architect of the coup who later became prime minister, has been using the church, which has a membership of 270,000, as a political tool, the CIA reported. So, the Moon organization's ties are directly back to the Korean CIA. But the Korean CIA maybe actually my note about the Korean CIA is in the one that we were about to read. Because the Korean CIA was actually set up by the CIA. And I think we're about to get to that. Yeah, right there. It's all a little tangled together, and it all seems to lead back to the same places. When George W. Bush faltered in New Hampshire in early 2000, it was Moon's, this is the son George, not the elder George anymore. It was Moon's shadowy cultist right-wing network that came to its rescue in South Carolina. Moon's forces helped turn a certain primary defeat into a double-digit victory by spreading Moonies, his zombie-like followers, throughout the state. As the Washington Post reported, an array of conservative groups have come to reinforce Bush's message with phone banks, radio ads, and mailings of their own. So Moon was invested not just in George Bush Sr., but also in George Bush Jr. over decades of political involvement. And the Bush angle is going to make a lot more sense when we get to the big document set. But here's all of the big correlations that I want to draw here. Sasakawa was suddenly freed with another accused war criminal, Yoshio Kodama, a prominent figure in Japan's organized crime syndicate. So these are two Japanese war criminals of the three. There's three of them. And they were put away in this crazy prison after World War II because they'd done some crazy shit. And they had ties to Japanese organized crime. They had ties to the Japanese military, the Japanese intelligence organizations. They were put away in this prison after World War II. But then the CIA turned its stance on Japan from demilitarization to actually, oh, fuck, we got to contain this communism thing. And so they switched and decided that what they wanted to do was take over Japan from a political perspective and use Japan as a shield against communism. And in order to do that, they decided to let these nationalist war criminals go and to send them over as CIA operatives to take over Japan. No matter that they were literally Yakuza bosses and war criminals and deeply corrupt, that was actually kind of the point. And these are two of them. Sasakawa and Yoshio Kodama, prominent figure in Japan's organized crime syndicate, the Yakuza. They were freed in 1948, 1 year after the National Security Act established the CIA as the successor to the OSS. In January of 1995, Japan's Kyoto News Service uncovered documents establishing that Kodama's release coincided with an agreement he had made with U.S. military intelligence 2 months earlier to serve as an informant. Declassified documents link Kodama's release to the CIA. So these guys were literally released as CIA operatives and sent over to Japan to take it over. Sasakawa's and Kodama's CIA ties are a reoccurring theme in their relationship with Reverend Moon. In 1997, because Reverend Moon was deeply involved in this political party that we talked about last time, the Liberal Democratic Party, that seems to have been funded to the hilt by the CIA. Seems is the wrong word. That was definitively, for sure, funded to the hilt by the CIA to take over the political space in Japan. And that is largely the big picture of the story that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about where all that money came from tonight. But the operatives that did it were CIA informants. In 1997, Congressman Donald Fraser launched an investigation into Moon's cult. The 444-page congressional report alleged Mooney involvement with bribery, bank fraud, illegal kickbacks, and arms sales. The report revealed that Moon's 20,000-member Unification Church was a creation of the Korean Central Intelligence Agency. The Moonies were working with KCIA Director Kim Chong-phil as a political instrument to influence U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. CIA was the agency primarily responsible for founding the KCIA after World War II. So, the CIA, as part of America, after we win World War II over there, we're occupying all that territory. And they help set up the Korean CIA because they still want a beachhead on China there. And they help set up the new Liberal Democratic Party in Japan because we want a beachhead as Japan to push back on China over there. And out of this trifecta springs this Moon cult with close ties to the KCIA and all these CIA operatives that got sent over to take over Japan. The U.S. CIA was the primary organization, okay? Moon organization has denied any links with the U.S. intelligence agencies or the Korean government. Moon, who is Korean, and his two fascist Japanese buddies, Kodama and Sasakawa, worked together in the early 1960s to form the Asian People's Anti-Communist League with the aid of KCIA agents. The league allegedly used Japanese organized crime money and financial support from Chinese Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek comes up when you look into the stories of all the heroin trafficking up in the Golden Triangle and China and the resistance movement against China. And we'll dive more into that another time. But it's interesting that all of these people that turn up in all these different pieces of CIA history seem to all turn up in this story, and they're all friends. And where the money comes from is going to be pretty interesting. Working with the KCIA, Moon made his first trip to the U.S. in 1965 and shockingly obtained an audience with the former President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Both Ike and the former President Harry S. Truman lent their names to letterhead of the Moon-created Korean Cultural Freedom Foundation. So just to remind you, we are reading from articles. We're just in the note-taking view. So I'm just outlining all of these sketchy CIA things that the Moon cult was up to. They weren't just a religious organization as they purported to be. They were doing intelligence operations. They were buying up businesses. They were laundering money. They were doing female followers of the Unification Church were accused of entertaining and horizontally lobbying U.S. congressmen while keeping confidential files on those that they lobbied at a Washington Hilton hotel suite rented by the Moonies. Lobbying, entertaining. What do you think they were really doing? The Fraser Report documented that Moon was paid by the KCIA to stage demonstrations at the United Nations to run pro-South Korean propaganda campaigns. The congressional investigator for the Fraser Report said, "We determined that the Moonies' primary interest, at least in the U.S. at that time, was not religion at all, but political. It was an attempt to gain power, influence, and authority." Kind of like Turning Point. After Ronald Reagan's presidential victory in 1980, Moon's political influence increased dramatically. Vice President George Bush, former CIA director, invited Moon as his guest to the Reagan inauguration. Remember this for later when we get into our buddy George Bush, because tonight we're going to focus all on George Bush Sr. and how he came to be the CIA director and just how he got that nickname Poppy. And just remember that when George Bush was inaugurated as vice president alongside Reagan, he personally invited Moon as his guest to the Reagan inauguration. Bush and Moon shared unsavory links to South American underworld figures, as well as others. Vice President Bush immediately saw the value of forging an alliance with the politically powerful Moon Organization, an alliance that Moon claims made Bush president. I think it's probably bigger than that. Moon was convicted of income tax evasion in 1982 and spent a year in the U.S. jail. But that didn't slow him down at all. He just seemed to get more and more popular, despite being a convicted felon for what is ostensibly money laundering and intelligence operations. Didn't matter. Just went back on doing his thing. Who else have we heard of that gets arrested for crimes related to intelligence operations and then gets let out and nothing changes and he just keeps doing it? And doing it, and doing it. The Frontline documentary identified the Washington Times, which Moon owned, giant newspaper in Washington that Reagan said he read every morning, as the most costly piece in Moon's propaganda arsenal, with losses estimated as high as $800 million. Still, the documentary asserts that his old friend Sasakawa's virtual monopoly over the Japanese speedboat gambling industry allowed money to continuously flow into U.S. coffers. I think they got that part wrong. This is a running theme in the reporting on the Moon cult. It's always like, oh my gosh, they're committing all these crimes. They're involved in intelligence. They're doing all this sketchy shit. And they have this endless flow of money. They're just like literally burning money in all of their US-based businesses. None of them are profitable. They're burning hundreds of millions of dollars at a failing newspaper that they just keep printing, at this radio station, at this publishing company, at all these events, all this shit that they own. There's a bunch of it. A restaurant, a seafood company, you name it. They're just losing money like crazy. But there's always more money coming from overseas somehow. And the reporting always seems to go back to like, oh, but they tricked all their followers into raising donations. Oh, but his buddy was like, had a monopoly on Japanese gambling speedboat industry. So he had hundreds of millions of US dollars to just throw away for no reason. I don't think so. No, sir. I do not think so. I don't think that the criminal underworld bosses are throwing away their hard-earned gambling money from the speedboat gambling industry in Japan to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars to get no return on it. No, when you see money just shoveling into a fire that has political implications, that pulls strings in this world, that controls thoughts, that controls narratives, that gets people elected, that's intelligence agency operations, because they're not actually trying to run a business. They are investing in an outcome. The whole point is that they're spending money on the outcome. They're not trying to run a successful newspaper and make money back. They're making money other places, doing other things. And their whole goal is to just fund the newspaper, regardless if it makes money or not. The Bush-Mooney connection caused considerable controversy in September 1995 when the former president announced he would be spending nearly a week in Japan on behalf of a Mooney Front organization, the Women's Federation for World Peace, founded and led by Moon's wife. Bush downplayed accusations of Moon brainwashing and coercion. The New York Times noted that Bush's presence is seen by some as lending the group legitimacy. He got paid, some people said as much as $10 million for going and speaking at this thing. Bush shared the podium with Moon's wife and addressed a crowd of 50,000 in the Tokyo Dome. He told the faithful, Reverend and Mrs. Moon are engaged in the most important activities in the world today. What do you think Bush Sr. thought of as the most important activities in the world today? Because I don't think that he was concerned with the Moon cult spreading the good word of their perverted view on Jesus Christ. I don't think that that's what Bush meant when he said they're engaged in the most important activities in the world today. But I think that Bush Sr. meant every single word of that sentence. And by the end of this, I think you'll understand what I mean by that. The following year, Moon bankrolled a series of family values conferences from Oakland to Washington, D.C. The San Francisco Chronicle reported, in Washington, Moon opened his checkbook to such Republican Party mainstays as former President Gerald Ford and George Bush, GOP presidential candidate Jack Kemp, and Christian Coalition leader Ralph Reed. Sounds an awful lot like Turning Point. Family values conferences all over the country? That sounds a lot like Turning Point. In November 1996, Bush and Elder arrived in Buenos Aires, Argentina, amid controversy over a newly created Spanish language Moon weekly newspaper. Because Moon was just moving all over the place into marketplaces where the CIA was interested in being and starting businesses in industries that the CIA likes to be in, like the news, like media, like newspapers. And Bush just went on a tour to go and tour all these new businesses down in Latin America that Moon was opening. He didn't just visit Argentina. He then traveled with Moon to neighboring Uruguay to help him open a Montevideo seminary to train 4,200 young Japanese women to spread the word of the Unification Church across Latin America. The young Japanese seminarians were later accused of laundering $80 million through a Uruguayan bank, according to the St. Petersburg Times. That story is fucking crazy. If I'm remembering correctly, it was all within 1 week because they were getting, shall we say, investigated in the United States, and suddenly they buy a bank in Uruguay through very sketchy means, and then suddenly a fuckload of cult members just show up with the exact maximum that you're allowed to deposit without filing a report, and they all deposit that amount, and suddenly the entire bank takes in like 100% more than it's ever had in its life in American dollars, all in a couple days. Weird how that works. It's the shadowy network around the Moonies and the CIA that helped propel both George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush into the presidency. Recently, the Messiah's newspaper, the Washington Times, has spent most of its time attacking President Obama. More important was his marriage, Moon's marriage, of convenience to the CIA and the Bush family. His corruption of American politics lives on. So, just to give you a flavor of how deeply involved in literal intelligence operations the Moon cult was, and especially how deeply involved in George Bush Sr. the Moon cult was. And remember, we got on the Moon cult because Candace couldn't help but notice that the Moon cult was funding Liberty University, where all of the people that built Turning Point USA came from. And when I noticed that the Moon cult essentially was formed by the CIA and the KCIA back in Japan, best buddies with all of the people that the CIA put in power in Japan to take over Japan, to found the political party that still controls Japan to this day, that's when I knew we had to talk about Major General Robert L. Ferreira and the 5-Star Trust. And that's where we get to the actual topic of today's show, these FBI documents. But you'll understand once we get into this why we had to talk about Moon's friendship with George H.W. Bush before we go here, okay? Because you're going to have so much more context about what we're talking about with that all fresh in your mind. Weird fucking cult formed by the KCIA, the Korean CIA, on behalf of the CIA, that's friends with all the CIA informants that are taking over Japan, that comes over to America to do foreign influence campaigns on behalf of these guys, with an infinite amount of money, just always more money coming over from the East, from Japan or Korea or who knows where. Well, we're about to talk about where all that money comes from. But to do it, we are going to dive into some complex documents, and I need to give you a little context. And ultimately, these documents are a bit of a trust me. These documents are not, they're not 100% for sure real. It's possible that these documents are forged. I have extensively tried to falsify them. I've asked AI in multiple ways to analyze the actual markings on them, the stamps, the numbers, the syntax of the actual pages. And everything that I can find in that regard perfectly matches real FBI documents of the era. Everything that I've found online, from other documentation to fact-checking facts within these documents, all of that seems to line up. We got a whole other 100-page dossier that corroborates what's in this one. But ultimately, it's a leaked document with a complicated chain of custody. You'll have to make up your own mind. Today, we're going to just play them like they're real and think about what that means. And by the end of the next show we do about the 5-Star Trust, when we go into the big dossier, then you'll have a little more context to decide for yourself. But this document, which I found on archive.org randomly while I was doing a different investigation years ago, stumbled across this and was like, what the fuck is this? Took a lot of digging to kind of unpack it, figure out what it was, verify it, corroborate other parts of the story, because it's not entirely clear the entire story from just this document. There's a lot of context that I had to go to other sources for that I'll show you in the future. But this document is an FBI report written in July of 1989 for Senator Ted Kennedy. I'm trying to think. Is that the closest we can go? Okay. So these documents were written in 1989 for Senator Ted Kennedy. And through picking through it all, the context is that Ted Kennedy caught word of this Jason Bourne type of guy called General Ferreira that seemed to be a CIA operative that was doing a bunch of sketchy shit. And Ted Kennedy, for whatever reason, I don't know why, wanted to know everything he could know about this guy, General Ferreira. So he wrote to one of his buddies in the FBI who he had gone to school with, and he said, yo, crack open the vaults and write up everything you know about Major General Robert L. Ferreira for me, please. And he was asking specifically about something he called the Japanese, Singapore, New Zealand, Kentucky connection. That connection is the CIA's secret bank accounts full of drug money. From when our boy Poppy Bush had helped set up a heroin smuggling operation, allegedly, surrounding the Golden Triangle outside of Vietnam and supplying our boys with smack. throughout, before, during, and maybe even after the Vietnam War. So we're about to get deep into a really crazy story, and it's about to be very complicated. So buckle up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show it to us in this document format with highlights so that we don't have to read every single page, every single everything. And I'll probably switch back and forth between them a few times just to give you this context, but also give me the highlighting context. So he starts his report to Ted Kennedy saying, per your oral request on the 5th of June, you asked for me to give you this full report. Here's everything we've got. We dug through everything available from files from the Bureau, as well as anything top secret, confidential, personnel files, Department of Defense, the CIA, Department of the Navy, Army, Marines. He basically says, I got everything I could find about this guy. I collected all of it. We've got a whole bunch of sources from inside sources that we are spying on the CIA. We're spying on the Department of Defense. We're spying on all the other operations. And I've collected everything we've got, and it's here. This is the story. And later on in the story, he says that actually they've been ordered to destroy all these documents as well. And I suspect that whatever caused them to be ordered to destroy these documents is what caused Ted Kennedy to want to know about it. I think I'll give the other disclaimer when we get to that part. So, during the tenure of Richard Helms as director of the CIA, decisions were made by the director with implied approval of the Oval Office, the president, to draft a blueprint and put into motion a plan by which the CIA could have as much funds as and when needed without knowledge of Congress. This would accomplish the dual purpose of carrying out clandestine and covert operations without the clearance of the Congress, as well as avoid the necessity of having to request any extra funds, and thus divulging the workings of any covert operations in progress or planned. As in, the CIA wanted lots and lots of money to do lots and lots of shit that they weren't supposed to do. And they didn't have enough money to do it all. And they didn't want to have to ask Congress for that money because then they'd have to tell Congress that they were literally experimenting with brainwashing, torturing children, torturing prisoners, giving people drugs without their consent or knowledge, testing chemical weapons in warfare, smuggling drugs, all sorts of good shit. They didn't really want to talk about all that in order to ask for the money for all that. And so they came up with this plan with the implied approval of the Oval Office at the time, and planned out by Richard Helms, the director of the CIA. I would argue the most effective director the CIA ever had. The most shrewd and cunning and effective CIA director of all time. The 5 experts picked were General Edward Lansdale, who ran the CIA activities in Vietnam, William Colby, who was to be put in total command of the blueprint operation when enacted, George Bush, who asked and received approval to have his top aide Richard Armitage be brought aboard, and Lieutenant Colonel Robert Ferreira, a top CIA asset, who at the time was on assignment in the Congo on the Patrice Lumumba situation. The Patrice Lumumba situation is a famous CIA story of overthrowing the Congolese government because Lumumba was getting some big ideas about sovereignty. They couldn't have that. So, Four of the 5 were handpicked for their very special abilities and expertise. This is, by the way, before George Bush was officially in the CIA. This is back before he was in the CIA, when he was a pilot in Vietnam, a really good pilot back in the days. So they say 4 of the 5 were handpicked because they were badasses, and Armitage was brought along by George Bush as his personal gopher, whatever that means. Bush was chosen for his knowledge of China and his wartime flying ability, as well as being on the way up within the CIA. General Lansdale was brought in because of his expertise as a top CIA asset, especially in breaking insurgencies, as he did with the Hooks in the Philippines in the late 50s. He's a super gnarly dude. And by breaking insurgencies, what they mean is fucking up local population movements and sowing discord and division and general chaos. William Colby was picked for his knowledge of Southeast Asia and to command the operation's first phase. Lieutenant Colonel Ferreira was included because of his varied experience as a pilot, as well as command of over a dozen languages, and his position as founder of the Special Forces Green Berets. Could not confirm that. Then again, he also basically doesn't exist. I have one photo of him total on the whole internet. The 5 names were submitted to the godfather of the CIA, John Foster Dulles, who gave the plan his total blessing. And I'm just going to remind you, as we go into this story is going to sound completely unbelievable. And it might not be true. But the most unbelievable part of this story is how much of it actually checks out and how much of it I actually have corroboration of from other diverse sources. The plan presented called for a second airline. So they set up an airline for the CIA. The first one had been called Flying Tigers. Whitney Webb covers that extensively in this book. They set up another airline called Overseas National Airline as a CIA front company that they would run the planes out of. This is over in Vietnam, Laos, and Thailand. The master plan called for the CIA to enter into the drug smuggling business in a total and complete fashion. Each of the 5 planners would have his own field to handle. Bush would be the secret head of the airline and handle all the shipping of the drugs under forged waybills. Armitage would be the gopher for the group and the intermediary with any undesirables. So Richard Armitage would be the guy they send out to take messages to people and to, just keep people off their backs. General Lansdale would handle all the distribution network and collection services within the military in Vietnam because they were smuggling these drugs to Vietnam service members, to Americans. William Colby was to handle the setting up of all the manpower from runners, peddlers, pushers, collectors, and so forth, as well as the elimination of any who might prove to be uncontrollable, be they American or Vietnamese. Lieutenant Colonel Ferreira was to use his contacts in Latin America and in the Middle East to obtain from various governments the needed drugs, heroin, cocaine, marijuana, LSD, etc., as ordered by Colby. Bush was to handle the opium from China. The operation was given the name Eagle 2 because Ferreira was superstitious and he liked his old code name Eagle. There's a note about Colby, who later becomes the CIA director. Colby became insane with his power, and before he was finished with Phoenix, the Phoenix program, which you can look up, over 20,000 suspects were executed and over 2,500 U.S. citizens were accused by Colby of being collaborators, and they vanished. So there's all these parts in these reports where they mention other pieces of CIA history that you can corroborate for yourself, that you can go look up these operations, but they add this fucking crazy color and perspective that's like, are you joking? Like, what? What did you just say? But the more you know, the less crazy it sounds. So, they set up essentially a giant heroin smuggling operation, as well as other drugs too. And they're not just selling it in and out of Vietnam to American soldiers. They're also trafficking it out internationally. Bush Sr. was instrumental in this whole plan. Bush's nickname is Poppy. Not like Papa. His nickname is Poppy. That's Bush Sr.'s official, if you know, nickname. And I can only imagine that this operation, one of the CIA's most successful in its history, because they got away with it, is probably why he got that nickname. Allegedly. It's all just allegedly. It's all just a big conspiracy theory. So, they ran these drugs for a long time, but Colby started to cause a lot of problems because he started killing all these people and, disappearing all these U.S. Citizens as, suspected collaborators and bullshit. They're very paranoid. Helms tried to keep it all together. He tried to have Colby eliminated, but Colby had a life insurance policy in terms of blackmailing them all because he was in on this, and he had documents cached away to expose it all, so they couldn't really get rid of him. And over time, it skips over a lot because we're just getting an FBI report of what this FBI officer was able to uncover and kind of dig up for his boy Ted. But apparently, Bush, for his cooperation, was groomed for his present position at the time during '89, which was when he was on the way up in the CIA. I think he was the deputy director, maybe. Or actually, no, that was when he was vice president, present position, as well as becoming director of the CIA. So, this is the part that we mentioned yesterday. Or not yesterday, last time. The plan with Japan. More problems were to be encountered in later years with George Bush. No, that's the wrong one. The plan was in full force when the United States government encountered continued opposition to its request from the Japanese government ruling party to put CIA-controlled people in power. Bush personally picked an obscure party formed in 1955, bankrupt and with very little membership, to back in the possible takeover of government. But the Liberal Democratic Party, the party they chose, needed vast amounts of funds to carry out their part. They had to buy the membership and the votes. It was decided to give to this obscure party all the funds needed. And before they finally achieved power, a sum of over 300 billion Japanese yen had been funneled to them. This was carried out by Lieutenant Colonel Ferreira, our Jason Bourne character, for he had a very special relationship with the first cousin of Emperor Hirohito, Prince Hiruko Watanabe. And thus the colonel had an open door to Japanese politicians and to the Diet. So this document directly alleges that George Bush Sr. is the one that had the idea to fund the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. And more specifically, he's the one that knew about all of this drug money that the CIA was sitting on over in these secret bank accounts over in the East and said, hey, we've got all the money we need to fund a takeover of the Japanese government. We'll just funnel all this drug money to them. Bags of cash in the night. And Japan will be ours. Just give it a few years. Our FBI author says that, in effect, Senator, is the start of the Operation Eagle 2, which over time has now evolved into what you refer to as the Japanese, Singapore, New Zealand, Kentucky connection. This connection came about in a rather strange manner, and were it not for unforeseen circumstances, there would not now be any such connection. There is a code name used in this regard, Senator, and that is Studebaker. And they kind of get into these coded references to the Studebaker program. But I want to get a little deeper into this because there's a number that seems to come up a few different times here that I've got receipts for. I've got a scan from an original bank deposit for this number that is involved in this money laundering operation all the way back in the 80s. And that number pops up in the Moon story almost exactly. And it kind of blew my mind. So we're going to go a little deeper. So here, our FBI author is talking about how it's impossible to even get anyone to admit that Lieutenant Colonel Ferreira exists at all. He's like a total ghost. There's no record of him. We're trying our best. Like, I tried everything to dig shit up on him. Barely can find anything. We have it on totally reliable authority that Ferreira is responsible only to the real director and secret director of the CIA, Mr. Helms. We have taped conversations between Ferreira and the powerful Baron Philippe Dudaphne, as well as with Helms. And just to remind us, we're reading a CIA document typed out on a typewriter with very consistent type font to indicate a genuine typewriter from the period. And he's just talking about his own level of uncertainty. As an FBI operative, this is what I think I know. This is what I do know. We've got it on these sources. We've got audio recordings of this. We had files of this. We don't anymore. That kind of shit. That kind of language comes up all the time. But this is the part where things get money laundery. The amount in question that now has been arranged to be given to Horn totals 318 billion Japanese yen, all from the sale of drugs to our service personnel. Keywords. All from the sale of drugs to our service personnel. The profits and the payoffs have reached such proportions that Mr. Helms has ordered that all operations be terminated. So, little summary real quick. They set up this crazy big drug smuggling operation in Southeast Asia before and around the opening years of the Vietnam War. it grows and grows and grows and makes them billions and billions of dollars. And they start to squirrel it away into all these accounts and do things with it and do covert operations with it, which this report barely even covers. There's also mentions in here and in other sources that refer to this story of them also squirreling away post-World War II loot from the overthrow of Japan. And Japan had a bunch of loot that they kind of looted back, that they squirreled away into secret holes and accounts and stuff like that as well. Kind of hard to corroborate. Hard to corroborate all of it. But their drug smuggling operation allegedly gets so big and so profitable that Helms is kind of like a little sketched out. And it's like, hey, maybe we should close this down. We're going to get caught. And, but all throughout that time, they've been doing this plan that George Bush Sr. came up with all this drug money. Because they've been smuggling the drugs, and George Bush was like, hey, we really want to take over Japan, and we've got all this money, and if we just pass this money from, over here in Laos, right over there to Japan, no one will ever know, and we'll just buy the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. Well, all that money flowing into the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan in some ways leaves a paper trail. Not a super obvious paper trail, but it sort of leaves a paper trail. You kind of have to launder it in. And at a certain point, one of these Japanese politicians that was receiving laundered funds got caught with his hand in the cookie jar in what's called the Lockheed Martin aircraft bribery scandals, which was a whole big scandal that happened in many countries all around the world where Lockheed Martin was bribing people and doing kickbacks and pay to play politics and all that shit. Happened in several countries. It went pretty big in Japan. And some of these politicians, particularly Kakue Tanaka, that were getting money from the CIA, also got caught taking this bribery scheme with Lockheed Martin. And the CIA boys got really worried that accidentally they were going to get exposed because of the investigations into the Lockheed Martin bribery scandal. That's how it describes it here. We'll go back to the original document view just to give you guys some orientation back to where we are here. In 1976, the hand-picked new director of the agency was George Bush, who served until 1977 only. This was not a very peaceful time for the agency, for during the 70s, the puppet of Helms, Prime Minister Kakue Tanaka, was found with his hand in the cookie jar, making money on the side in the scandal involving Lockheed Aircraft Co. This was too close to all being made public, so Helms, who in the meantime had formed a totally strong relationship with Baron Philippe Dudaphne, who represented the real capital of the world, the Rothschild Empire, decided to stop Operation Eagle II and start another clandestine money-making operation and leave Japan. Because, might as well get in bed with the Rothschilds. They come up repeatedly throughout this story. And so part of the closing solution called for the return of the 318 billion Japanese yen to the CIA or to whomsoever then Director Bush named as recipient. So they laundered a whole bunch of funds into Japan, not entirely clear how much, but the way it's told here, oh, sorry, I just read all that without you even seeing it. The way it's told here sort of implies that there was a paper trail on 318 billion Japanese yen that needed to sort of be unwound, or else it would leave a stain. It would leave evidence. And so they started to devise a plan to launder 318 billion Japanese yen back out of Japan. That plan got very complicated. Does it have the bottom of it here on this one? It was decided that a wealthy and loyal party member was to be found in Japan, one who would agree to have his name entered into backdated records as having been the individual who loaned the funds to the party in the first place. So they're planning to forge documents to say like, oh, this is the really rich guy that loaned all this money to the Liberal Democratic Party and funded the overthrow of the Japanese government. They handpicked someone by Prince Watanabe, handpicked Mr. Soichi Iizuka. He was a very respected multi-billionaire in Japan and totally loyal to the royal family, so he agreed to do it. But then they needed to wash the funds on the way out, for they had to pass it through Iizuka's hands and then back to whoever Director Bush designated. But they couldn't just pick a CIA person. They couldn't give all these funds they needed to get out to their Japanese business guy and then just send it to the CIA, because that's really obvious. So what they needed to do is they needed to give this Japanese guy all this money, be like, cool, he's got the money, he's the big donor, he's the big rich pockets guy. Then he needs to convert it into something that can kind of get lost on accident, get gambled away, get, invested and lost. But actually, it's going to another businessman that's in America. And then he needs to kind of launder it through his spaces into money that the CIA can access. Money laundering is very complicated for a reason. The way that they chose to do it at this time is Iizuka suddenly found himself in the possession of gold certificates from the Japanese treasury. With these, Iizuka was instructed to buy a certificate of time deposit, number 405-1100-92, issued by the Mitsui Bank Limited, home office in Tokyo, Japan. The plan was for him to sell the certificate and supposedly invest the monies in various countries, with the eventual story that all investments had proven to be losers. This was allow the actual cash to be given to Bush's nominee. See, so you turn it into gold certificate, you sell that certificate, you get cash for the certificate allegedly, even though you actually gave the certificate away. And then you say you invested all that cash, but it was all losers. I lost it all. 318 billion yen. Whoopsies. But it leaves no paper trail. It just kind of all disappears. It all goes to dead ends. And the actual note was passed to your buddy who's going to help you launder it. The records that we have photographed copies of from the top secret CIA files show that Helms insisted on everything being done to perfection without any possibility of a slip-up, because Helms was fucking good at his job. They went so far as to legitimize the gold certificates by having them registered with the proper international banking institutions, including the World Bank. So they got these gold certificates super, super legit. The penchant for perfection caused that work, this finding of this laundering pipeline, to take 5 years before they found the ideal American buyer, because they wanted to find an American buyer that was a sketchy dude, but not a high-profile sketchy dude. Someone that was like a businessman that was respectable enough that you could, come up with a reason why this guy had done all this crazy business and made all this crazy money, but someone that no one was really looking at and no one would really dig too deeply into. It's kind of a thin slice of society to pull from, and he has to not be already associated with the CIA. So, real quickly, I want to take a break from this document to remember the number 405-110092, Mitsui Bank Limited, and the number 318 billion Japanese yen. Where is the certificate? It's right here. This is allegedly a photocopy of the original deposit certificate from the Mitsui Bank Limited. And you can see right there, I can see right there at least, 405 110 something dash 92, 00 dash 92. It's the same number, and 318 billion Japanese yen. This document comes from a different location and a different source than the FBI report that we are currently reading. And we got a whole bunch more documents like that, but we're not going to get into all of the external documentation right now. I think we were further over. The gold certificate right here. So, they laundered all this drug money, or rather they sold all these drugs, got all this money, set up all these bank accounts, and used all of that to fund this political transformation in Japan. But eventually it got a little hot for them, a little risky, and they wanted to exit out and clean everything up and pull all their leftover money back and close the door and be done with it and go get into business with the Rothschilds. But that involved laundering all this money out, and that took several years. And so in the meantime, they kind of went their separate ways. They moved on in their careers. They were quietly working on laundering this shit, looking for the right guy. It took a while. Eventually, they did find the right guy. And his name was Marion Horn Jr., or J.R. Horn. In the meantime, there's this crazy little side quest here where, sorry, I scrolled too far over. Where General Lansdale, who was involved in the original plot, suffered a mysterious and total memory loss. And Colonel Ferreira resigned from the operation when he discovered that the drugs were being given to U.S. servicemen and not to the North Vietnamese or the Viet Cong as he had been led to believe. This is where Colonel Ferreira becomes a really interesting motherfucker. This guy's like our Jason Bourne of the story. Hey, Gigi, go lie down. Psst, go. Psst. Go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that got you paying attention. And so Major Ferreira, who, if you remember, was in charge of all of the drug smuggling. You know, why don't I give you a picture of Major Ferreira, Major General Ferreira? We've only got one picture of him on the entire internet, and he's right here, allegedly. This is Marion Horn, the American side of the money laundering scheme to launder these Japanese yen out of Japan, who we've barely met so far. And next to him right here is Major General Robert L. Ferreira, the Jason Bourne of this story. Crazy motherfucker. We're about to hear some shit that he has done. But I just wanted to give you a face for General Ferreira before we get too deep into it. Before he cuts off Manuel Noriega's testicles. And so there's this little side quest in the documents. There's a bunch of side quests. This document like loops through a bunch of different stories because he's trying to allegedly this FBI agent is trying to summarize this whole complex multi-decade storyline around this guy and this operation. And he talks about how Colby did become director. He's kind of like seeing how like where everybody went afterwards. Colby did become director of the CIA, then so did Bush. Richard Armitage stayed Bush's like gopher guy. General Lansdale mysteriously lost his memory. And Lieutenant Colonel Ferreira got super fucking pissed when he discovered that they were actually selling drugs to U.S. service members. And because he'd been thinking they were selling them all to the Vietnamese. And he was maybe threatening to expose it or something because a contract by Dulles was put out on the colonel. Dulles is like the godfather of the CIA, like the big daddy. So apparently he put out a kill contract on the colonel. But a leak enabled the colonel to defend himself. First, the colonel called upon a dear friend, Prince Watanabe from Japan that we heard about, and informed him of what was transpiring. Then, without any stop, the colonel contacted other very close friends, such as the Baron Louis de Monchi, the Chief Justice of the World Court of Justice, as well as Baron Philippe Daphne, whom the colonel had saved from the Nazis during World War II. During the 01 missions for the OSS in World War II. And as his last trump card, allegedly, the colonel called upon the Baron Guy Rothschild, the head of the Rothschild banking family. The colonel had been very instrumental in obtaining fake Nazi credentials for the Rothschilds, which enabled them to escape occupied France in 1943. They owed him, and he collected. Helms also talked to Dulles to lift the contract because of the pressure exerted by the cards that Ferreira had called into play. I don't know what to make of it, but that's the story. And this part of the story starts to get into how Ferreira is like this cutthroat, cold-hearted killer fucking smuggling drugs and doing CIA shit, but only when he thinks it's like serving America's interests. And the moment he finds out that they're actually giving these drugs to Americans, he's like, oh, no way, dude. And he like is about to go rogue. And they have to like talk him down. There's this whole section about how Helms goes and has a personal talk with him and gets Ferreira's word that he won't tell anyone. And apparently Ferreira's word is like, word is bond, yo. Because he's like that level of CIA agent, apparently. I don't know. It sounds unbelievable until I try to prove it wrong. And then I just corroborate it over and over and over again. And then it gets into this Japan part. Helms obtained the word, Ferreira agreed, and then went so far as to give them the solution to continued control over the Japanese government. The colonel suggested that the CIA form a new company that would do all of its business in Japan and have so much success that they would have... Holy shit! I had not put this sentence together yet. What? Okay. Just listen to this sentence one more time with me. Gigi, go lie down. Go lie down. It is not... You already had your dinner. Yeah. The colonel suggested that the CIA form a new company that would do all of its business in Japan and have so much success that they would have money to burn. This money would be used to give to individual politicians, not to the party. It was pointed out by the colonel that by control of the individual, you control the party. Thus, the birth of recruit and then control, to this day, of the individual and the party in Japan by the CIA. Listen, not for sure, but they might be talking about the moon cult, literally. That literally might be the moon cult. That is exactly the description of the moon cult, which we know was founded by the Korean CIA, which was just a cutout created by the CIA. And we know that it was founded in close association with all of the CIA plants that were all over there. And they had money to burn, to give to political causes and to all sorts of other causes, just money to burn. Because it was being funded by a gigantic secret black budget bank account that no one knew existed that was full of drug money that they weren't supposed to have. That's why, okay? To be clear. That's crazy. I never realized what that sentence meant because I didn't know about the moon cult the last time I really studied these documents. Wow. Okay, so then it gets into where the perfect buyer appears. This Marion Horn Jr. guy that was in the photo in the green suit earlier. And they find him. He gets selected. He's like the perfect double dealer. They like basically say like, hey, do you want to fucking get super rich? And all you have to do is be the CIA, like the front man for this gigantic operation that we're not really going to tell you too much about. You just have to not ask too many questions and fucking just keep your nose out of trouble and let us put your name on all of our shit so that it doesn't tie back to us. Because I explained the other night how at this point the CIA is doing all of these secret operations in all of these places with bank accounts that aren't supposed to exist, with money that they weren't supposed to have raised because they were doing it clandestinely. And they were realizing that like, fuck, dude, we're going to lose track of all this money. Like we're going to lose track of that bank account over there. We're going to lose track of that black budget bank account over there. And so Helms realized that he needed to unify them all into some sort of networked trust that they could access all of it in some sort of modernized way. But they can't just deposit all their fucking heroin money into like JP Morgan. At least not without doing a lot of favors for Jess Staley, if you know what I mean. So what they did is they partnered with the Rothschilds, who had a network of banks, in exchange for a cut. And they put a front man's name on the accounts, Marion Horn Jr., under his name. So it's not the CIA's money. It's just this random businessman's money. No one looks too close. And it's hidden in all these tax havens and all these banks controlled by the Rothschilds, where they just look the other way as money comes and goes from these accounts. And that way you can access the money all over the world from any of these branches of this scheme. And no one's really going to see what's in the accounts because it's all under the name of Marion Horn Jr. Nothing suspicious there. He's just a nobody. But the Rothschilds are the conduit that allow for this money to just flow in and out and in and out. But it lets them keep track of all of it without losing it all. That's the big picture of what's detailed in these 22 pages of this FBI document, as well as the like 96 pages of the other dossier, as well as this book by a man that met one of these guys that played an instrumental role in the story that we can get to another time, as well as other corroborative investigation that I did along the way. And holy shit, it might have just talked about the moon cult. Okay, so this is talking about how they recruited J.R. Horn. Horn proved to be exactly what all concerned needed. I'm going to just go and check on my highlights here. It talks about how they someone eliminated all the witnesses to this Mitsui Bank deposit certificate. And then it starts to get distracted because the story stretches out over years and it takes some turns into Iran-Contra stuff and into what Casey got involved in and then what Ferreira got involved in and then what Noriega got involved. It gets into all these side quests that are not directly related to Japan, but some of them are kind of fucking funny. So we're going to go in over some of them. It was during this phase of the operation that Helms realized he needed funds for the aid of the Contras in Nicaragua. The only solution was to continue operation. So they were doing all the drug trafficking over in Southeast Asia, and they were funding all this money into Japan to buy Japan out. Japan gets into this hot mess with the Lockheed aircraft scandal, and they're like, oh, fuck. Maybe we should pull some of our operations back out of Japan so we don't get caught in the crossfire of them investigating this other scandal. So they're like, okay, we'll launder the money back out of Japan. We'll back off a little bit. We'll calm the fuck down. And instead, we'll maybe like fund this other organization and keep our nose clean. But then they're trying to shut down all their drug smuggling operations, allegedly. And then they're like, oh, fuck, man, we gotta fund this Contra shit. We got communists at our doorstep in Central America. And so he's like, all right, let's spin the drug operation back up. Spin the drug operation back up. Only this time, it had to be put under the control of Armitage and with the full knowledge of Bush, but Bush was busy being more important now because he's vice president now, but not of President Ronald Reagan. Got to keep his nose clean. Not sure he would approve of this. Nor now of General Ferreira, because General Ferreira was like their main guy back in the original operation in Southeast Asia, but it was because they lied to him and said that they were selling all the drugs to Vietnamese people. He found out that they were giving the drugs to an American service member, and he's like, fuck no, I'm going to burn it all down. And they had to talk him down. They tried to kill him. He wouldn't let them kill him, all this shit, right? Convoluted story. So now that they're trying to set up a new drug smuggling operation down in Latin America with cocaine, they're like, well, we can't bring Ferreira into this. Can't tell Ferreira about this. Can't even let Ferreira know about this. So they start having to build a new network out of all different people. Okay? And that's a key piece. Because history has now proven that Colonel North was no General Ferreira. Because you've heard all about Iran-Contra, and you've hardly heard anything about the Golden Triangle smuggling operations that I have just been describing. Because they got away with it. Almost nothing has ever come out about it, except for little leaks here and there. At this point, Senator, this is a critical disclaimer, okay? So this is in the document. Remember, FBI friend of Senator Ted Kennedy is writing this whole report about this whole crazy story, and he's just trying to fill Ted in on everything that happened in this crazy journey. And he just drops in real quick to say, like, hey, listen, at this point, Senator, how much is fact and how much is fiction is hard to tell. But we believe that the records in our possession pretty much prove that all is about as close to fact as is possible in something like this. But remember, even if this is all true, this FBI agent is piecing this together from disparate intelligence gathering, deep obfuscation tactics. He's trying to report on CIA operations by spying on them and collecting all this FBI information about the CIA. Well, the CIA is trying to obscure what they're doing from everyone else. They're running disinformation on each other. They're lying out their teeth. They're trying to cover up black budget operations, secret bank accounts, all kinds of crazy shit. So just take it all with a big grain of salt to remember that, fuck, the whole document could be a fake. I don't think it is. I've pretty well verified that it's not actually all fake. And I've got a lot of different corroboration of that. But even within the document, there could be forgeries and things that misled the person trying to write this report and trying to skew the story. So take it with a grain of salt. But that being said, it's probably a lot more on point than what they taught you in high school history. Page 11. This briefly touches on why we have the documents in the first place, because as they were getting this money laundering scheme up and running, and Marion Horn is starting to go through the process of receiving this money, shit started to get a little weird, and he started to get his hackles up, and he started, Gigi, go lie down. And he started to get concerned that these guys are going to fucking betray me. I don't trust these guys. I do not trust these guys. This is the CIA, and I am expendable, and this is sketchy. And he starts collecting what is essentially an oh shit dossier. He apparently felt that he was in too deep, and he had to do something to keep the wolves off of his back. So he started to move every rock in the hope that the action would enable him to keep his head above water, collecting a giant dossier of original documents, all sorts of shit, blackmail, essentially, on the people that he was supposed to be laundering money for. That got their hackles right the fuck up, and they were not down with that. And who knows if they were already going to double backstab him or not, or who knows. I just made a little note of 60 Adams Street, Biddeford, Maine, as it has these little details in here of addresses, bank account numbers, people's names, lawyers, chief justices, things that are like, oh, actually, I could verify that. And I went through as I first found these documents and actually tried to verify all of these different things. And this is this guy that they say they used as an informant named John Bennett. Last known address in our files on him is listed as 60 Adams Street, Biddeford, Maine. And I went and looked it up. And it is associated with his family, which is a weird detail. It's like a weird little detail that's like, well, that checks the fuck out. And there's a bunch of those in here, but I just made a note of that one. But I just want to skip, I want to skip over McBride. Ferreira goes after Horn. It's kind of an interesting part. It's why we got all this stuff in the first place. Because they decide they need to discredit Horn. Horn is kind of slippery. They try to put everyone in prison. Horn kind of gets away. He's got some friends. He's kind of a slimy guy, slippery guy. And these CIA guys are like, fuck this guy. We got to discredit him. We got to take him down somehow. And they send General Ferreira off to sort of like entrap him in something, to just get him and put him away. Like put him in jail. We don't want to kill him necessarily, but just fucking put him away. But Ferreira, they're a little sketched out by Ferreira now because he's so good at what he does. But he's also a little too idealistic, apparently. He's like not down with smuggling drugs to Americans. He'll just smuggle it to Vietnamese. So instead, they lie to Ferreira, according to the documents. And they say that this Marion Horn guy, who's actually, in reality, he's working with Ferreira's plan. He's working as the money laundering front patsy for all of Ferreira's operational history. But Ferreira didn't know that. He didn't know who was laundering the money for them. And so they lie to Ferreira and they say he's an FBI spy that's trying to uncover the whole operation and steal the funds and expose us. So you got to go out and you got to stop this guy. And Ferreira's like, all right, cool. I got you, bro. No problem. And so Ferreira goes and starts investigating Marion Horn, and he starts looking for FBI informants, and he starts uncovering all of the FBI's people inside the CIA. And they have this whole page about how he starts an investigation, and like he's like uncovering all their people, and they're trying to throw him off their trail because they're like, fuck, this dude is now like exposing all of our dudes in the CIA. Like we're the FBI trying to spy on the CIA. It's this whole fucking thing. But then Ferreira fucking digs through all this shit. He's super good at his job, and he gets to the bottom of it, and he's like, wait a minute, like this dude's a patriot. This Marion Horn guy that you said is an FBI informant, he's not an FBI informant. He's like a total patriot. You're trying to fuck him, aren't you? You're trying to fuck this dude over. And he's like not down with it. And he flips. And he's actually, once he discovers this, he's like, this guy's a fucking patriot and I like him. And so what he does is he flips and starts helping Marion Horn to collect documents to protect himself. And General Ferreira actually feeds him a fuckload of classified documents that become a part of the dossier. That's why we now have, like in a roundabout way, that is why eventually this document hits the internet years and years later, the original bank deposit note. And this is them there. Ferreira on the right, Marion Horn on the left in the green suit. And there's a ton of other documents that go with it too. A bunch of letters, bunch of bank statements, things like this. This is a letter to the president of Mexico. And he basically helps him collect a giant oh shit file. And he spends a whole bunch of his money buying gifts for other people on behalf of Marion Horn to basically make him a bunch of friends and just protecting him. It gets very convoluted. They try to go after them both. They can't get them both. We'll skip it all. Lawyer McBride, Ferreira goes to work. And then I want to talk about how allegedly. Okay, so to wrap that up real quick, it says, this matter has now been resolved. We are informed by Bennett and Horn that Horn is within weeks, if not days, of obtaining all the funds. So apparently, they work it all out. They all come and play nice, and they say that Horn is going to get the funds. This is in 1989 now. I don't know if he ever did get the funds. But they kind of close this chapter of Horn trying to get blackmail on his CIA guys to protect himself, and them trying to kill him or get rid of him to protect themselves. And they're all like, all right, everybody chill the fuck out and play nice and stop blackmailing each other. We're all in this for the same reason. We all want to get rich off of drug money that we all have in these black bank accounts, and it's all fine. We're all going to be fine. And for a little while, they're fine. And allegedly, Horn was going to get paid. I don't think he ever got paid. But for that, we'd have to go to this book right here, which we're not going to do tonight. We got to give Gigi another treat. I mean, actually, let me real quick. So, just to cap off this story with this money laundering real quick, because I want to talk about why Iran-Contra got exposed, allegedly. In the meantime, William Casey, now the director of the CIA, had begun to look upon himself as a demigod. He's setting up this whole new drug trafficking operation in Central America to fund the Contras, all this arms smuggling, all that shit. And he's getting all full of himself, and he's like building out this giant network and doing all this crazy shit. He started to get very careless. Files that we have obtained show that without consulting Helms, the actually competent one, Casey set about establishing his own kingdom with him as the emperor. He obtained help from the very depths of society and put one Alder Berryman Seal in command of the drug road to obtain the funds for the North operation with the Contras. The agency had used Seal since 1981 as a contact man. And this is all confirmed, documented history about the Iran-Contra affair at this point. If this was written in 1989, it was before we all knew that, but he did in this report. I mean, I guess in 89, we did know a lot of the Contra stuff, but there's some pretty spicy details in here. So this whole plan came to the fore when he inadvertently stepped on the toes of Casey and almost destroyed the Contra movement. The General Ferreira, our Jason Bourne guy, got wind that a second-rate hoodlum, once a member of the CIA, was involved in the importation of all drugs into the United States. It appears that Ferreira had some spare time on his hands, so he asked some of his friends to do something about El Gordo, Seal. So he hears that Alder Berryman Seal is smuggling drugs into the U.S., and he's like, who the fuck is this guy? He knew him from the past, and he doesn't like him already. He calls him El Gordo, and he's like, all right, the Gordo is fucking flying drugs into my country. Not on my watch. Not on my watch. No, sir. But first he's like, maybe I should make sure he's not working for the CIA, because that's the kind of thing he might be doing. That's the kind of thing we might be doing. So Ferreira calls up Director Casey because he didn't know. So he calls up Director Casey and asks. He didn't know that he was responsible to Casey, but then he just asks. Maybe I skipped over that part. He did not know, and if he did know, he did not care that Alderberryman SEAL El Gordo was in fact working for Director Casey and was responsible only to Casey. Nevertheless, our tapes of phone conversations to the office of Director Casey, so allegedly the FBI was spying on the director of the CIA, they were bugging his office, show that General Ferreira informed him that he had information showing who the real leader of the drug cartel in the U.S. was, and that he wondered if he, Ferreira, would step on any toes if he stopped that fat son of a bitch. So, to translate, Ferreira calls his old buddy Casey from back in their Vietnam drug smuggling days, and he's like, yo, this fat motherfucker is smuggling drugs into the U.S., and I know who he is, and I'm gonna fucking kill him. You got a problem with that? And Casey's like, no, I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about it at all. Doesn't work for me. I don't know anything about it. Because he's fucking scared of Ferreira, because Ferreira's a badass. And Casey's a little bitch. But then immediately afterwards, allegedly, 30 seconds after the general concluded his call, Director Casey called Helms and informed him of the conversation. Oh shit, Dick. Ferreira knows about SEAL. He knows about the drug smuggling. He's going to go kill him. What do we do? And Dick Helms is like, fucking figure it out, bro. You suck at your job. Figure it out. He's not stoked. But Casey wasn't fast enough. He wasn't fast enough. Allegedly, on the evening of February 19th, 1986, at precisely 6 p.m., Alderberryman SEAL got out of his white Cadillac in the parking lot of his favorite restaurant in Miami, and the General Ferreira had put out a hit on him and had hired a whole bunch of his guys to go and just pepper the dude full of Uzi bullets. And 96 bullets smashed into SEAL's head and body, and he died instantly. That's all official history. But what we don't know is that allegedly it was contracted by General Ferreira. Allegedly. And the last little piece of funny information that I want to pull out of these documents before we wrap up this document and kind of zoom back out to Korea, Japan, the Moonies, is this piece about Manuel Noriega. There is a bunch of stuff about Mossad connections and how Casey started getting the help of this Mossad operative, Harari. But eventually, as the drug smuggling operation in South and Central America expanded, the CIA needed more waypoints. They needed an airport. They needed more help. And they enlisted the help of this guy named Manuel Noriega, who was a general in Panama. And Panama had some great banking laws that they really liked. They wanted to launder money through there. And General Noriega was all good with it. He just wanted help achieving his dream of becoming the leader of Panama. So they helped each other out. They helped him take over Panama. He helped them smuggle drugs, flying drugs through Panama, laundering money in Panama. And he became the waypoint for a whole bunch of the drugs, guns, training, supplies, all that was going north. General Ferreira has his own intelligence operation, basically, and is basically doing his own spy networks and is keeping his own intel. And he does not like Noriega at all. And he's got this guy named Spadafora, Hugo Spadafora, that's spying on Noriega. And after a couple years, Noriega finds out about this spy, Mr. Spadafora, and he tortures him to death, then puts his body in a U.S. mail sack and mails it to General Ferreira at his house in Mexico. Apparently, because he thinks he's a big shot. That was apparently his way of making a point. Ferreira, it is rumored, went undercover on his own into Panama and somehow made his way into the compound of General Noriega directly. There, in the general's own bedroom, General Ferreira is said to have accosted Noriega, bound him up, and personally cut off his testicles. Then he stuffed them down Noriega's mouth. The Bureau recorded the incident in its entirety and the voices with their hidden microphones because they were spying on the guy too. But somehow, All the documentation has disappeared from our vaults. The general injected Noriega with a full dose of cocaine and left him bound in a drugged stupor. It is believed that this is the cause of Noriega's cocaine addiction. Noriega cannot inform anyone because he would have to tell all that he is not macho, and he lives in constant fear of Ferreira. So just to clarify, what that's saying is that this Jason Bourne motherfucker, General Ferreira, he's running his own kind of contact network, which does not surprise me. That sounds very believable. He's got a lifetime of intelligence operations at the highest level, and he's got contacts all over the place, and he's keeping tabs on what's going on in places, and he notices this drug smuggling operation in Central America bringing drugs into the U.S., and he's like, fuck this. Not on my watch. And he starts investigating who it is. He gets pissed off at the Alder Berryman Seal guy. He whacks that guy. And he's also keeping tabs on Noriega because he's a key node in that whole network. And he's like, fuck this guy. He's spying on him. He's spying on him. And his spy gets caught. Noriega thinks he's a big shot and chops that spy up. He tortures him to death, puts his body in a bag, and sends it to Ferreira to be like, don't you ever mess with me. Little did he know that he shouldn't be messing with Ferreira. So Ferreira goes to General Noriega's compound, like the dictator of Panama's compound, sneaks in on his own, allegedly, and goes into Noriega's bedroom at night, wakes him up by cutting off his balls, shoving them down his throat, allegedly, and then, I'm sure some other stuff, had some choice words for him probably, and then allegedly leaves him there in a cocaine stupor with his mouth full to be like, don't ever fuck with my people again. Allegedly. That's the story that is right there in this report. And the crazy thing is that it kind of fits into history. I mean, there's no way to corroborate that. I can't corroborate that. We can't corroborate it. But everything in this document that I can corroborate checks out. So, I don't know. In the end, the document ends this way. Ferreira takes Horn under his wing and protects him, the guy that was supposed to be the money launderer that they tried to betray, and then he betrayed, and then they betrayed, and then they're like, no, we're all good. Takes him under his wing, protects him, kind of smooths everything out. He kind of goes into hiding because he's kind of like not cool with them anymore, and he's like, fuck all this noise. He kind of burns himself. The Bushes go on to do bushy stuff. And it kind of, the story kind of peters out at that point for this moment. But the bank accounts, they don't go anywhere. They very much stay alive. The Bureau has had as many as 24 agents. So they're trying to follow up on all this. They were trying to follow General Ferreira and figure out what the fuck is going on here. They're trying to figure out what's up with the story, what's up with this money, what's up with this drugs. The Bureau has had as many as 24 agents assigned to monitor all movements of Ferreira. But when he started to approach our agents and reprimand them for terribly sloppy methods of trailing, we just decided to abort. They're literally trying to like send teams to tail this dude. And he's like surprising them and being like, hey, go back to school, bitch. You suck at your job. We cannot report why the Helms-Daphne Rothschild cartel has not yet given the approval for Horn and his people to collect their funds. All the intelligence we can gather leads us to believe that it is all connected to the political situation in Japan, and that they are waiting for that to settle down before they allow the risk of release of the funds. That is the only manner of assuring themselves that the Japanese will play ball to the very end. So, this report in 1989 ends with, we were told to destroy all our files. This is what we know. And at this point, it looks like the funds are still tied up in Japan and they're waiting to move them out of Japan until the situation calms down there. There's a lot of other documentation that goes more into modern times. But, just click it once. But I want to just kind of remind us all of what we just talked about. And what were the key pieces here? The big pieces are George H.W. Bush got his nickname Poppy, allegedly, by smuggling the poppy juice in and out of Vietnam during the Vietnam War as he was coming up in the CIA. And that allegedly played a large role in him becoming the CIA director down the line, and then vice president, and then president down the line. Okay? In those documents, where they're talking about how those were the people that made the plan and orchestrated the plan to take over the government of Japan, to fund the Liberal Democratic Party that would become the ruling party in Japan, using their CIA informants, very well documented, and that they seem to have had the idea to set up companies to launder the money through to pay the politicians with. That sounds an awful lot like the Moon Cult, which was a complex, interwoven, spiritual conglomerate of companies that had endless funds to just give out to everyone. Okay? But then things got a little hairy. Some of the corruption seemed to get a little too close to home, and it got very messy as they tried to not get caught with it all. And eventually, in Iran-Contra, they did get caught. But you know what a lot of you are probably thinking of when we are talking about George H.W. Bush smuggling opioids back in Nam? You know, his son, George W. Bush, he presided over the War on Terror. And what was it that they had over there in the War on Terror? They had a whole bunch of poppies. So if you don't know, the Golden Triangle used to be the world's #1 opium production location over in Southeast Asia. Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, southern China. That was back in the 70s. But somewhere in the 80s and 90s, it shifted. And Afghanistan became the world's leading producer of heroin. And by the time the global war on terror came around, Afghanistan was producing like 70 to 90% of global supply of heroin. And then H.W. Bush's son is in charge of the war where we go over there now, and suddenly we've got all of our soldiers guarding poppy fields. Because the Taliban had come in and had cut them all down, burned all the fields, and stopped all of the opium cultivation. The Taliban had stopped that. And then a year later, the entire U.S. military is on the ground, stopping that. Like, no, sir. Start planting that poppy again. Grow that shit. We will guard it with American troops. And what happens next? The opioid epidemic. So it seems to run in the family. It seems to run in the Bush family. Let us not forget about their granddaddy, Prescott Bush, who was an overt Nazi, who tried to overthrow the U.S. government in the business plot. A military coup back before World War II. Look up Smedley Butler, look up the business plot, look up Prescott Bush. The Bush family is a whole rabbit hole. And our boy Poppy Bush is a particularly important and successful nexus point in this whole story. And this is just one piece of his history. We didn't even talk about allegedly people spotting him at the JFK assassination and possibly the role he may have played in all that as well. But now we're going to zoom back out of this whole crazy timeline of CIA history in this document. And we're just going to zoom right back in on a brief circling of our wagons and reminder of the characters in Japan at the time. Nobusuke Kishi became the first prime minister of the Liberal Democratic Party that swept Japan's politics and has been in charge of Japan ever since. He was a war criminal in prison in America that the CIA let out and sent over there to do their dirty work. He was friends with his boy, Yoshio Kodama, who was a Yakuza boss in the Japanese criminal world that was also one of those war criminals that the CIA let out and sent over there to help take over Japanese politics. They were both of them, and their third buddy, the speed race boat gambling guy, all of them were good friends with Sun Myung Moon, the founder of the Moon Cult. Although it's a little unclear if he actually founded the Moon Cult or if he inherited it from the KCIA, the Korean CIA, in its early days. There's conflicting reports about that. But suddenly, this massive organization is sprung up with all of this money just flowing out, not only into Japanese causes and Japanese politics, but also into American causes and American politics. And now, do you remember that article that we read at the very beginning of this whole thing? I think it's down here. Remember these articles about how good of friends George H.W. Bush specifically was with this guy? You remember how George H.W. Bush seemed to go out of his way to go to the openings of this guy's events and go to his companies and support him and invite him to things and go and speak at his things? Right? Right? It's just a little too convenient. A little too coincidental. And what was it that was the quote I liked the most? Bush went traveling with them. No, I'm losing the quote that I liked the most out of this one. Well, anyways, we have this organization in this Moon Cult that looks an awful lot like the structure that we see in Turning Point USA. A complex religious or political organization, not totally clear. It's kind of a nonprofit. And we're getting to this point where Turning Point USA and its origins was, donor funded and a little more transparent back in the day, not so complex. And over the years, it grew bigger and bigger and bigger and has more and more and more money flowing in from more and more directions that seems to be laundering in all sorts of weird directions. And then we get this offer to take it to the next level. And we've heard a couple of different stories about where that money might have come from, where that alleged next level money might have been coming from in the future if it was accepted, or right now, because Charlie can't deny it anymore. But I wonder, and I'm not saying I'm not accusing, and I'm not saying I know for sure. I'm not even saying I think it's the truth. I'm just saying I wonder. I wonder if there's not still bank accounts like this sitting around out there, be they Rothschild bank accounts or CIA bank accounts or Mossad bank accounts, Jeffrey Epstein bank accounts. There are black budget bank accounts sitting around out there secretly ready to fund these types of operations. And when you see organizations that are just throwing money at causes and not making money back, although allegedly making all their money from fundraising, which is what they said about the Moon Cult as well. They said they made all of this money fundraising. It's got me asking questions. It now has me asking an awful lot of questions. And so, to tie it all back around, once again, the point was not to say that that story is directly related to Charlie Kirk. Tangentially, through Liberty University and through the funding mechanisms and the people that brought us all to this story today, including Charlie Kirk and Andrew Colvett and a whole bunch of the other guys there. Tyler Boyer, for example. Steve Bannon was involved. But it's more a contextualization of how these organizations appear, how they present, how they're funded, and all the complex interworkings of operations that go on behind the scenes in these political wheelings and dealings. And I still haven't dug enough into it, but I have questions about why Charlie was in Japan and Korea right at the end there. And it's a little murky because he was not there on direct behalf of the Moon organization, which is very much still around. It's just splintered into sort of 3 different camps. Now that Moon has died, his wife took over the main branch, and one of his sons seems to have taken over the very militant populist guns, rah, rah, rah branch that seems to be designed to capture the young, disaffected males. And then there's another branch that I think is led by one of his other sons. And they seem to sort of be splintering off to capture different audiences. And they are apparently all at war over the control over Moon's legacy. But in the behind the scenes, they seem to all just keep working together. And so I say all that because Charlie was there on behalf of this other thing that was kind of unrelated, but he was speaking about the persecution of religious freedom in Korea and Japan. And it just so happens that as he was there, brought there for that purpose, the Moon organization is like the loudest voice there, being like, they're persecuting our religious freedoms. And when you dig that open and dig a little deeper and start to look at, wait a minute. What's going on over there right now? And why was Charlie there? I do have some questions. And I'm still putting together the sourcing on all that. And we've gone way more than deep enough for tonight. But we will get to all of that, Charlie's trip to Korea and Japan, in the future. And what is that all about? I see the chat discussing Erica Kirk and her fettiness. Yes. Oh, yes. I was discussing that with my boy Alec on this podcast we filmed today. Erica Kirk is more than suspicious at this point, and she has told more than enough lies in public, clearly, to put her firmly in the I don't trust you sphere. And she is not alone. The Charlie Kirk investigation has flipped a lot of people on their heads and exposed them as belly creatures, as evil people, as liars, as betrayers. And some of them we expected, and some of them we really did not see coming. And we were discussing earlier today when I was hanging out with the homies, why is the Charlie Kirk assassination the most important story of the day and possibly of our lifetimes? And it's this weird, it's hard to put your thumb on it and like pinpoint it, but it's this nexus point of everyone is woken up enough by now that we're all ready to have this conversation about like who really runs the world, who's really controlling politics, who's really building these organizations. What actually is Turning Point USA? What is the Daily Wire, right? And people on all sides of the conversation have been psyoped enough and wronged enough and just fucked with enough that everyone's waking up to there's something seriously wrong with this system. Seriously wrong with the U.S.-Israel relationship. Seriously wrong with our politicians not representing us and working for banks and foreign nations and deep staters and all this shit. And Charlie represented this ongoing conversation point between young people and old people. He was the rising tide of populism. He was the tip of the spear of what appeared to be our voice, our like young people saying, no, this is what we want. This is what we're asking for. This is what doesn't make sense. This is what America speaks as, right? At least on the right. And he just so happened to be this key figure in this nexus of the Israel-U.S. relationship, which we all realize by now is the crux. That is the crux of the American establishment today, of American government, of the American deep state, of the American conversation of where we're going to go and what's going to happen. And Charlie found himself right in this nexus of all of these crossing lines of the most important conversations that are all slowly being ripped open, Band-Aid being ripped off all over the last 10 years. And whether Charlie knew what he was getting himself into or not, whether he knew what he was the face of or not, whether he knew who he was married to or not, regardless, he was there at the right time, at the wrong place. Look at it however you want. At the turning point. Literally at turning point. And he learned something or discovered something or saw something or was told something or decided something that mandated his termination, apparently. And that moment has just ripped the fabric of our American society, of our whole global culture, of like everyone's brain. It's ripped the matrix wide open to where we're now having these kinds of conversations, niche as they may be, about the history of, wait a minute, is the entire history of Japanese politics for the last 80 years a giant fucking lie? Yeah, it kind of is. Not quite 80, more like what, 60? Actually, kind of 80, yeah, kind of. And then it's not just Japan, it's actually, oh shit, is that a conduit for a influence operation, a network of influence operations that reached out all across the globe, certainly into American politics, all through your parents' lifetimes, and even into your lifetimes? The moon cult is very much still alive and active today. It's not quite what it used to be during Bush Sr.'s time, but it's very much still there. And those types of networks are very much still active. So I don't know. It's just, it's a crazy time to be learning. It's a crazy time to be researching. It's a crazy time to be alive. It's a crazy time to be trying to figure out the truth, because holy shit, the truth is complicated. That's as far as we're going to go into it for tonight. That is more than enough in your brain buckets for tonight. Very complicated story. If you made it through this whole discussion, you're a fucking legend. If you made it for the whole time, drop a GG in the chat. If you made it for the whole thing, drop a GG in the chat. We're about to transition into super chats. We're going to give the girls some treats. We're going to give the girl some treats. She's just waiting there for treats. I got to go get her some more treats. Yeah, the chat is pretty cool, right? The Moonies are hooked up with CNP Hardcore. Wait, Coach Colin's not in the chat, is he? Someone's saying, Coach Colin, bring on the mints. Shit, that's a bunch of GGs in the chat, dude. Thanks for being here, homies. Thanks for tuning in. I know this was a dense stream, long and complicated. Not for everybody. But for the real ones, the ones that want to learn, the ones that want to know, and it's just a crazy story. I mean, come on. It's a crazy story. And sometimes it's important not to do the most viral things, but instead to do the things that like are the most informative to me, or I think inform the general perception more, or that just like are important to talk about. And there's a whole lot at the bottom of this story. I think I have only begun to scratch the surface. Yeah, thanks for being here, chat. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys being here. A mint for my pleasures. Thank you very much. Thank you. GMFNG. Yeah. Okay. So now let me try to figure out which screen my super chat, where's my mouse? Which screen is my super chat set to? Okay, well, it's set to a dead window first off. So I'll restart that capture. And now it's set to a little window over here. So if I do this and slide her in, boom. Now we are cooking. Let's go, baby. All right. I think we're ready for supers. But before we do supers, why don't I kick some tunes for us for the supers, eh? Why don't we bump some tunes? Oh shit. What? I went and closed Spotify? Why would I do such a thing? Right? Don't you think, chat? We should get some tunes, chill out a little bit, roll through some supers, talk some shit for a little while, and then I gotta go get dinner after that. Getting hungry. Yeah, we'll play some low key tunes here. Maybe some lo-fi. We'll go to the discography. If you need to take a bathroom break, refill your drink, whatever you need, now's the perfect time to do that. And I got an idea. Not electric. There we go. Yeah, how's our volume on that? Oh, interesting. It's not coming through, right? Yeah, you guys don't have that audio for one reason or another. Maybe I need to reset this audio capture. There we go. I never know what's working over here. I'm doing so much vibe coding that I keep fucking my own computer up, changing things around and like changing settings and Lord knows what. So now we're good to go. How's the volume, team? Chat, tell me how the volume is. If the volume's good, yeah, drop some vibing dinosaurs in the chat or whatever you got. Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, it's great. Smooth. Cool. So it's hard for me to read over there, but I can read it down here on this screen. So thank you to all the super chatters, to all the sorry, like anyone that gifted subs on Twitch this whole night that I didn't see because I was just flowing. I'm sorry. During Free Speech Fridays, I just get in the flow and I don't even pay attention during the flow. I love you. Thank you, chat, for all. I'm sure a bunch of you. I know some of the regulars were in there gifting subs. I'm guarantee it, and you're all legends. I appreciate it. Stacy, I know you were there. I see you. And everyone else that gifted subs, thank you. Everyone that gave supers, thank you. I'm going to try to get to all of the biggest ones, and I'll try to get... I think we don't have that many to get through. I think that we've all kind of learned that you don't need to give me a million fucking supers every night. Take your supers over to other newer, smaller creators and help them out, which is sick. And so I think we might actually be able to get through all of them. And we're starting with Wildflower Gypsy. But actually, we're starting with my screen share is crashed again. Is that true? Yeah, it's frozen up again. So I guess I'll restart the capture. And I won't fuck with it. Okay. Wildflower Gypsy, thank you. Thanks for hooking it up. Wildflower Gypsy runs an Instagram account, and she's followed me for like ages, like since the very beginning. She does an outdoor like adventure wilderness Instagram account that's super fucking cool, that you should follow, especially if you're into the outdoors. I think that's your handle on Instagram as well. I don't want to accidentally dox your other handle. So Gypsy Wildflower, if you're in the chat still and you want to, drop your handle in there, because she does sick ass adventures and stuff on the Insta. Not left versus right. It's us versus the Epstein class. Former Army Ranger Greg J. Stoker is running against 84-year-old Rhino John Carter and crazy Valentina Gomez in Texas 31. And boy, do I hope he wins. Hell yeah. Dude, Greg J. Stoker is the shit. Yes. F the Epstein class and all their pedo buddies. Yes. And I met Valentina Gomez one time at a Bitcoin conference, and she just strikes me as the epitome of someone that she's young. She's like in her, like, she's like 26 or something. Assuming she's not a like literal bad actor with all the worst of intentions, she just strikes me as a leaf in the wind that will blow any direction where she thinks the views are. And that is not what we need in American politics. It felt very spineless and very gross. And I was like, grow up and grow a spine. Get some decency and some morals and stick to them. Like Greg J. Stoker. for example. Maybe you can school her. Thanks for the big super, Gypsy. Appreciate it. Jasper Joe, big $100 super. Thank you. This is still going on in our government. I have relevant information I'd like to get to you. Maybe you can use it for your research. You don't have to read this out. Sorry, I already did. You can find my email on my website, cancelingcarol.com, and you can email it to me if you want. Full disclaimer, I rarely get back to emails. I get way too many of them. But it does go in there. I do check it occasionally, but not very often. And this is where I always tell people, you should start making your own content. You should make a video. You should get it around. Because if you find something crazy and you put it out on video, it can get spread around and shared. Ultimately, I just received too much incoming to actually attend to all the incoming I get. But I really do appreciate the donation. I appreciate your attention and time. And send me an email. Jasper Joe. I'll see if hopefully it's similar to Jasper Joe. Mex Gal 60-ish. Thanks for the big dono. Appreciate it. Curious Joel 89. Shout out to the Hasidic Jewish community that is being exposed on X as welfare scammers. That is a crazy one, dude. Not digging the fact that the town is called Curious Joel and it's pronounced just like my X and YouTube handle, Curious Joel. Awkward. Hey. They'll fuck it up and you'll bring it back, dude. I mean, don't let them hate on your name. You're the OG Curious Joel, and they are obviously here to reclaim it. Or maybe the joke there is that they were promised it 3,000 years ago. I don't know. But either way, thanks for being here, homie. And that is a crazy story, watching that footage of them being like, I don't want to talk about myself. No, like, we don't talk to you. Like, oh, I'm sure it's fine. Don't worry about where the money's coming from. We have like 13 kids. God said so. When they're like obviously all on welfare, is pretty wild. Jess Happy 5377. Thanks for the big one. Gigi, love what you are exposing. Yeah, Gigi is actually crushing it. She's killing the game, and I love what she's exposing too. And what she's exposing is that I'm like out of treats, dog. Is that like the cookie jar has run dry is what Gigi is exposing tonight. And like genuinely, all I got is crumbs, dog. She's like hyped on it, but still, sorry, baby, that's all I got is crumbs. So tomorrow we're gonna go have to hit the pet store, the local family-owned pet store, and buy more of this family-owned raw rewards. This is not an ad, but this is a family-owned company that I'm pretty sure is based out of Texas, if I remember. Oh no, actually. It's based out of Portland, Oregon. Northwest Naturals. Way up in the Northwest where I'm from. Support family-owned businesses. I don't give a damn. Senator Mike McKell is Governor Spencer Cox's brother-in-law. McKell wrote troubled teen bills, and Cox signed them. Cox funds Intermountain with both families. Megan McKell is UVU Emerge Services event marked event EMS not needed. If I'm understanding you correctly on that end there, that's interesting. EMS was needed. But yeah, the Intermountain healthcare linkages, the Intermountain companies, it's interesting. They seem to show up everywhere in the Charlie Kirk story. And maybe that's just because they're like the biggest healthcare company, the biggest everything company in the area. But I have questions. I have some serious questions. Techie Head. Epstein's Lolita Express was a 727. Same kind DB Cooper jumped from. Rear air stair hatch could have allowed dumping bodies mid-flight. Boeing tested 727 for airdrops around 1964. Pretty specific plane for Jeffrey Epstein to own. I actually have been put on that game before. I believe it might have been Jason Goodman, actually, that put me on that game originally and was explaining that theory to me, and I agree. I think that is a very reasonable theory. So for anyone that's not understanding that comment, what they are saying is that, let me just use a little, is that most planes, they have stairs that come off the side. But the 747 has a door on the bottom that you can just open and have a little like right out the bottom of the plane. So the plane's flying along and you can just like drop shit out the bottom, which is not how most 747s and Boeings and passenger planes are designed. And that specific type of that 727 was tested for dropping shit out the bottom by intelligence agencies. And so he just so happens to own the kind that would be really good at dropping bodies out the bottom. Kind of interesting. I live on the Gulf Coast in Texas in an area where we call the Golden Triangle. Keep your eyes out for drugs. Because, yeah, the Golden Triangle is a famous name for, like, the southern China, northern Laos, and kind of northern Thailand, Burma kind of areas. Anyone seen Narco Saints on Netflix? Korean drug smuggling Christians in South America. No shit? I got to look into that. I watched Cocaine Cowboys kind of recently. Crazy movie. And American Made. Great movie. All about Alder Berryman Seal. Well, they make him seem a little too cool because they make him be Tom Cruise. And in reality, he was this fat piece of shit. But, whatever. Still very interesting movies that are based on real history. I've not seen Narco Saints. I'll check it out. I'm always skeptical that Netflix is going to do any justice to history. But if you just remember it's all fucking fake and then just kind of rewrite your own history into the story while you watch it, could be worse. Can't stay for live. We'll catch up this evening, but wanted to send support. Candace led me to you. You led me to Baron to Coach, etc. This collective of red pillars and truth tellers, please continue to support the awakening. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thanks for dropping that support, even though you're not here anymore. And yeah, it is really cool to support each other and to watch what we each contribute and to see everyone kind of speak their minds and add their piece to the whole thing. And some of these folks are great. Like Baron has added so much. I know to watch Baron to try to figure out what's going on. I basically can just it's like some days I'm like, dude, I don't know what's going on. I'm waiting until Baron comes on to tell me what's going on. Because he's just constantly figuring new shit out. He's very smart. Silicone is a synthetic polymer, think kitchen tools and breast implants, while silicone, no E, is a naturally occurring chemical element, Si, used in modern electronics, hence Silicon Valley, not Silicon Valley. Yeah, that's like this old, when you get the wrong word in your like original child understanding of a thing and you say it wrong for like the rest of your life. Silicon Valley is like one of those in the back of my like early childhood brain that I just learned it that way. And now I get corrected on that all the time. And I know the difference and I know the correction, and I still just will inherently come out with Silicon Valley instead of Silicon Valley. But you are correct though. Awesome work, the syrup heist. I live in the heart of Quebec, production sites in the Laurentians, so it was cool to see my favorite journalist cover it. Want to research something nuts? Check the OKA crisis. Okanagan? I'll look into it. Thanks for the support. I'm glad you liked it. Y'all got a crazy time up there. I'd be so pissed if I was a Quebecois maple syrup farmer. I would riot. I'd be in jail probably. I hate it when people try to tell me what to do. And yeah, if you don't know about that episode, go check it out. It's on the YouTube. Whole episode about the Canadian maple syrup industry, the great Canadian maple syrup heist, the second largest heist in Canadian history to this day. They stole 12% of the Canadian Strategic Maple Syrup Reserve. It's a true story. Hey, Ian, love Bayer. I was literally using it at the shops yesterday, scanning maple syrup. Then a few hours later, you posted about it. We should call us truth seekers the carolers. Love from Australia. That's crazy, dude, that you were scanning maple syrup with Bayer. And then I was scanning maple syrup with Bayer at the same time. And then I was like doing a report on it yesterday, all about it. I'm glad you're liking it. And I'm glad you're using it down in Australia because Bayer app works all over the world except for North Korea and France. Don't ask me why. And so we just need people in international spaces to kind of scan those international products and help us enter them in, because some of them sometimes aren't in the databases. But as more people use Bayer in those places, all those products get added and the whole database expands. And if you don't know, Buyer is the app that me and two buddies built. It's free on the App Store for you right now, that you can scan any product in the store and figure out who owns it and who owns that company and who owns that company, and trace the money trail all the way to the top and figure out where your money's going, as well as like what's in the food, what's in the products, all that shit. Not just on food too. It works on lotions, shampoos, all that shit. Very proud of it. And we're going to have a whole bunch more coming out about it soon. We got a new update coming in the next month with cool new features John has been cooking. And we're gonna get creative and make some advertisements and actually like run some ads like out in front of the normies to try to get normies to think a little more about what they're buying. 20 plus years of Twig's parents being unable to pay off mortgage with 7+ liens and loans. November 3rd, 2025, mortgage paid off on UT government website. And November 24th, 2025, deed of reconveyance recorded with Washington County. Really? I'm going to look that shit up, dude. Chat, has anyone talked about that on their streams or on their videos? Are there any videos out about that fact about Lance Twiggs' family? Does anyone know about that? I don't give a damn. You found it today? Damn, dog. You should be making content. You should be making some fucking content, bro. Because if that is verifiable by publicly available information on the internet, and you have found that, like, that's how Barron grew his whole YouTube channel. Was like, he's got a good talent, which like maybe he's got more like maybe you don't have the natural talent, but he had talent and skills and you know, the ability. But then he got on a story with information that was relevant and useful, and he shared it with everybody, and everybody was like, what? And everybody tuned in, and voila. Like 5 months later, Baron Coleman is like the biggest YouTube channel of the year. And so when you got that good shit, you got to share it, dude. You got to share it. Dude, thanks for that tip. I'll look into that. I'll see if I can corroborate all that. I watched you then. Fire, fire, heart. I don't know what that means, but I appreciate it. Thank you. Just like Bono and both JR and Senior. Bono had those two in his back pocket. Bono's best friends are war criminals and Dr. Fauci. Yeah, Bono sucks, and I think you've told us this before, and I agree with you. Gary, some of us see the corruption and moved to the left. Some of us see the corruption and moved to the right. In a bell curve, is the center the peak of corruption? I would suggest that you see the corruption and don't do either of those things, and instead you fucking unplug from the matrix and walk away. Because lefts and rights are all lies. That's all the system. That's all the matrix. They want you fighting each other. They don't want you looking up, looking around, making friends, and talking about the truth. No lefts and rights. Fuck that. Unplug from the matrix. Plug into reality. What a great book this would be. Call it fiction, but write the story anyways. Make millions on the book and the movie rights. It would be a crazy story, right? This whole CIA document, this FBI document we went through, it is a book. It's called Dirty Laundry by Ken Peelock. And this guy, so actually, let me give you a quick primer here. This guy allegedly was in jail for being kind of a conniving business guy that was like a little too smart for his own good and kind of got into trouble and some fraud charges or something like that. I forget. And he claims that he happened to be Marion Horn's cellmate in jail, in prison, when Marion Horn went through the spat of where they actually locked him up to try to shut him up, which lasted for a while. And he was this guy's cellmate, and he was trying to get access to his documents in order to like get out. And he like tried to get this guy to help him, and this guy kind of like came to understand what it was and got all involved, and a bunch of people got it. It's a whole long story, but it's told in this book. You can buy it for yourself on Amazon. It's kind of a funny title, How I Stole Billions in CIA Drug Money, almost. And this book actually really helps paint the picture of the story of why all these other documents eventually got out, because this book and this guy was instrumental in getting all of these documents, which are in a lot of them, not all of them, are actually in the back of the book. Corroborative evidence. There's that photo right there. And a whole bunch more, all collected in the back of this book. Bank deposits, checks, notarized documents, etc. And I think that this story is a key piece of how the documents that we went through today actually wound up online eventually. And I pieced this together over years of finding this one and then finding that one and then finding those ones. And it all comes together eventually. Or who knows? Maybe it's just some extremely elaborate scam. I don't know. I don't think so. But yeah, it would be a great book. Great presentation. You're connecting the dots and exposing the totally unethical world we live in. Keep digging in. We've only just begun. Yeah, complicated topic tonight, but worth digging into. I think it's interesting. So I'm glad you liked it. Thanks for being here. I do my best to try to, my job is not always about covering the most entertaining thing or the most like viral thing or whatever. My job is covering interesting, complicated things that improve my and collectively our understanding of what the fuck is going on out here. And sometimes that means that the job is taking a very complicated, convoluted story and trying to make it entertaining enough and understandable enough that we can share it. Sometimes I do good, sometimes I don't, and we learn, we get better. Keep doing what you're doing, homie. We got your back. Thanks, Hammer. Appreciate it. Marvin Gaye, what's going on? Dude, what's going on, homie? Excited you're collaborating with my husband. It's funny how you say you're a fan of his. He told me, and I'm a fan of yours. Hodl GME. He's pumped about your event. Wish I could go. Sick. I don't know exactly who your husband is, but it's going to be a party. I'm stoked to go. If you know, you know. Yeah, I just got my flights. I'm super stoked. Super stoked. I'm going to have to ask. I'm going to have to ask who your husband is. We don't want to dox you or anybody. Don't dox anybody. But yeah, I've still got all my GME shares. They ain't going fucking nowhere, baby. Thank you for that drug war tie-in. Wrecked many Marines I knew in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. They were fucking guarding poppy fields. Pissed morality, then got addicted. 17 years sober here. Good fucking work, dude. Proud of you. Yeah, it's one of the most egregious crimes against our generation that there is. And it's unspoken, but it's true. And we all know it's true. And we all know where the opioid epidemic came from. We all know why we actually went to Afghanistan. Like, among the other reasons, too. One of the big ones was to get the opium flowing again for the opioid epidemic, for the Sackler family and all the other pharma companies as well. And they fucking used our soldiers to reinstate that drug smuggling operation. And when you know that Bush's dad came to power on the exact same thing back in Vietnam as Bush Jr. did in Afghanistan, it just is even more fucked up. And it even more paints the picture of exactly how much of a lie the whole system is. Hey, Ian, I'm about to start a show to help spread truth from my perspective in public safety. Haven't started recording yet, but I have everything set to go. Could we collab? Just shooting my shot. Maybe. I don't know. Start making shit. And when you do, actually, that might be your channel right there, Disaster D Media. What I'll do is I'm going to open a tab over here, and I'll go look for you. And I'll be real with you. I'm not just going to randomly collab with everyone on the internet that asked me to just because you send $10. But I will go check out your shit. And if you're providing value, I am a big fan of supporting small creators and helping creators get off their feet and start their shit. And sometimes I help out behind the scenes, and I just like for example, I messaged Baron early on and was like, yo, if you need any advice or help or anything, I'm a resource. And I'm happy to tell you everything I know about the industry, answer any questions you got. I'm a resource. And now he's like a resource to me too, because he's fucking smart. What is it? Disaster D Media? I wonder if that is... Sometimes it's actually hard. Disaster Dynamics Media, maybe? I don't think that's you, because you say you haven't started yet. But either way, start recording, start doing your thing, and then drop in and be like, yo, this is my channel. I'm proud of what I do. Check it out. And even better, honestly, like the truer, deeper strategy for social media is don't ask for anything. Make shit that's so good that everything comes to you. Just just focus on your craft, because if you need to ask for help in order to succeed, it means that you're not producing shit that's good enough yet. So instead, focus on your craft and get so good at your craft that people just can't help but share it. They can't help but watch it. They can't help but notice, right? I'm still hyped that you're doing it, and I'll check it out. But it's good to take personal responsibility for your shit and to work your hardest to make it as best as you possibly can and always get better. I'm getting carried away, though, answering this question because I love this kind of question. I love people getting hyped and making shit. So thanks for being here. Hey, from New Zealand, you're a legend, Ian. Cheers for all your epic research. Can you talk more about the New Zealand connection, please? Look after yourself. Yes, the New Zealand connection was a bank in New Zealand that was like a pass between that the money. It was when they originally laundered the money. It was from Japan through Singapore to a bank in New Zealand. And it was the bank in New Zealand is where the funds wound up sitting, where Marion Horn was supposed to be able to go get them eventually. And they just sat there for a long time. And it was just part of an obfuscation chain, I kind of think. It's a little unclear exactly why New Zealand and how it wound up there. But yeah, it's just sort of like a money laundering chain that New Zealand was at the end of. And when Marion Horn got put in jail to try to shut him up, his funds were locked up in New Zealand that whole time. I think I need to figure out how to... Because I can't scroll down. I know what I can do. Well, in order to show you guys the bottom super chats, what I need to do is reorient the whole super chat window thing here, because my scroller won't scroll that far down. So, in the interest, since we're almost done, like we're almost through all the supers here, I kind of want to I want to do them all. But what that means is you guys got to just sit tight here for a second while I just do a little, not that. Command C. While I do a little bit of finagling this down this way, and then move it up, and then move it down, and then we'll move it down, then we'll move it down, and there's the bottom, just like that. And now we can read from the bottom. Sick. And that gets us down to Brandon Kelly there. So now I can scroll up and get chirpy. Hey, is there somewhere you have a book recommendation list? Love the work you're doing. I don't really have a book recommendation list out. I've given them on the show before. I don't really want to run through them all again. But other than the one I was just showing, this is the obvious first. If you want to know the history of the CIA, this is an obvious second. I give this one all the time. And this one has chapters about Japan and about the CIA purchasing of Japanese politics. Actually. Where's my mouse at? I found tail numbers at both the recent COP ambushes in South Carolina and Florida. Looks intelligence operations. Multiple Chinooks in Greenville area from Fort Bragg. Recent cop ambushes? I'm going to be honest with you, homie. I don't actually know what you're talking about. I don't know if I've had my head out of the news lately and not been paying attention to that, or if you're speaking in code and I don't understand. I don't know what you're talking about. But that being said, document it. If you find flights, tail numbers and flights, screen record video of the flight radar or the ADSB exchange or whatever it is. If it's ADSB exchange that you found it on, take screenshots of the whole viewer so you have all the information so you can always go back and find it again, so you can document that it did exist, because they can scrub that shit. I know for a fact that they can scrub that shit. So document it. Lockheed Martin started with the F-104, then moved to the F-16, and now we have inflated costs with the F-35 program. It goes on still today. Oh, yeah, and they are overcharging the shit out of this whole government thing. They are milking it for all it's worth. You showed a tie between Moon and Ralph Reed tonight. Cabot Phillips' dad has huge links to Reed through the Christian Coalition, I believe. I did not know that. Thank you, homie. Thanks for dropping in here with that. Quick photo of that. Good tip. Appreciate it. You should look into John Foster Dulles, State Department, brother of CIA godfather Allen Dulles. What was the State Department doing at this time? Oh, yeah, the Dulles brothers are super fucking sketch. Which time? They were involved in all kinds of sketch all over the place. From overthrowing the government of Guatemala to overthrowing the government of Italy, Japan, Nicaragua later. All kinds of shit. The Dulles brothers they're a very significant piece of history. And they're very significant to the world order we currently live in. I'm at Bellingham, Washington. What's up, Bellingham, Washington? Shout out, dude. Notice my hardware sales hoodie? I got a new hoodie, guys. Support your local hardware store. Yeah. Although I'm not local to it right now, but support your local hardware store. Shout out to Bellingham. Great live tonight. Thanks, homie. I appreciate it. You rock. Also random, but my grandfather sold drugs while stationed in Vietnam as a helicopter mechanic. Whoa, dude. It was probably a piece of this network, honestly. Like, that's where the drugs were flowing from. That's crazy. He was probably an unwitting piece of this whole network. That's wild, dude. Thanks for being here. Note, Poppy had Colby offed over Franklin scandal. Was Colby offed? Was he like actually... Have I just forgotten about this piece of lore? I don't remember that being how Colby ended. But come to think of it, I don't actually remember how Colby died. If Colby got fucking for real? If anyone doesn't know, we're talking about William Colby, ex-CIA director. He was the crazy motherfucker in this plot that got too big for his britches and fucked everything up. Let me just peep his death section real quick. Whoa, dude. Bro. All right, guys, we're going to interrupt this program for a special message. This is the kind of super chat that I fucking live for, dude. Really quickly, let's pop into this mode. And I guess let's reset our screen cap here. Okay. So, William Colby, former CIA director. He looks like that. And he was in on this original smuggling plan that we were talking about. And when you go just peep his death on Wikipedia, on April 27th, 1996, Colby set out from his weekend home in Rock Point, Maryland on a solo canoe trip. His canoe was found the following day on a sandbar in Wicomico River, a tributary of the Potomac about 0.25 miles from his home. On May 6th, Colby's body was found in a marshy riverbank lying face down not far from where his canoe was found. After an autopsy, Maryland's chief medical examiner ruled his death to be accidental. Said that he was predisposed to having a heart attack or stroke from severe calcified atherosclerosis, you know what I mean, and that Colby likely suffered a complication of this atherosclerosis, which precipitated him into the cold water in a debilitated state, and he succumbed to the effects of hypothermia and drowned. Isn't that a funny way for an ex-CIA director to go? Right? Right. Yeah, sounds about right. Sounds about right. That's a good tip, homie. Who gave us that tip? Oh, here, sorry. Now I've got to now check out our, now we got picture in picture, homie. Yeah, we got picture in picture. It was down here, right? Yeah, it was note. Poppy had Colby offed over the Franklin scandal. Obviously, I'm not seeing the Franklin connection from just the Wikipedia article, but I'll dig deeper into it sometime. Because Franklin was earlier than that, but obviously the fallout can take a long time. That's a crazy tip, dude. Nick Shirley is from Utah and is LDS. Went on PBD for an interview. He confidently stated that Twiggs' family relocated out of state. You know, I don't trust a fucking thing that Nick Shirley says. Don't trust it. Whether it's helpful or not helpful, I don't know. I don't trust it. David Goldberg, Zephyr Plan, Mass Exterminations. I don't know what that means, but I appreciate you being here, homie. Shout out Old State Saloon. What's up, Old State Saloon, homie? That's our Idaho homies. There might be a big announcement coming out of Old State Saloon here in the near future. I'm not going to give away the sauce. I'm not going to give away the secrets. But there might be some big announcements coming out of the Old State. Love those guys. Some of the best people I've ever spent time with. Read Colby's bio in context with Conspiracy of Silence documentary. Yeah, heard that. I will. Last scroll up. Just want to say that I love you, bro, and I'm praying for you to become a full-on Christian. Your search for truth will eventually lead you there. I think I'm kind of already there. I just don't think I'm the type of Christian that most Christians become because I'm not the type of person that most people are anyways. And I don't think the way that most people think. And I don't follow orders. And I know that we're referring to orders from God, like, you know, the order of God. But there's an awful lot that's baked into the Christian faith, the way most people experience it, that is not the order of God. It's the orders of men and how you should worship God. And I'm never going to be a part of that, unfortunately. But that's different than God. And I think I'm probably pretty damn close to already there by what you're probably assuming or talking about. And thanks for being here. Just to clarify, yes, Disaster Dynamics Media is me. I was going a different way, but the Charlie Kirk incident changed it all. I appreciate you taking a look. I'm starting Disaster After Dark on the same channel. Hell yeah, homie. Sick. Cool. Let me see if I still got you up over there. I think I do. Yeah. Disaster Dynamics. I swear I just saw Disaster After Dark here. But yeah, I'll peep it. Sick, man. Thanks for the double dono. Ian, you're based GOAT. Any thoughts on releasing your notes app? Have you seen the Dre Dossier? Love the community y'all have created. Dre Dossier is a super smart girl. She is so smart. I've not seen a lot of her content. I don't spend a lot of time watching content if it's not directly related to what I'm trying to research right now because it's so easy to just start scrolling. But Dre is super smart. Tons of respect for her. I don't really know what her whole thing is or where she's from or what her like political or economic or social takes are. I don't know. But she seems very smart and I've seen some interesting shit from her. And my notes app, you mean Webb? Yes, it is super on its way. A like a internet-based version that everyone can access is on its way, but also an open source downloadable version that you can load up with all your own documents and kind of modify yourself and everything. That is also on its way. It'll just take a little longer, but we're getting it ready in the background. I am not the one. I am not the one responsible for that being ready to ship because I am but a retarded vibe coder. I have no fucking clue how to make something ready to ship to the public. My buddies that are actual developers are the ones building that. And so I'm just patiently waiting for them to nail it all down because they just keep on making it better and better and better and better and better and better. And I cannot wait for it to be out, dude. I'm stoked. And it's coming. Don't worry. Congress quietly turned biotechnology into a national defense weapon, waiving consent, expanding surveillance, and building a global power system inside the 2026 NDAA with zero public debate. Yeah, they love to just slide things in there. We are sliding right down into the technocratic future. We talked a lot about that on the podcast with Alex Zach earlier today. That'll be a really cool one when it comes out. And last one, Butthole said, first time catching chat live. Your storytelling skills are great. You ever heard of Coop? I think he does good work. I have. Coop did an awesome piece about the Las Vegas shooting where he added some really cool context about the CIA background and the arms trafficking and money laundering picture that's painted by Stephen Paddock's background. Super well done on his part. Really liked it. So that's it. Don't send any more super. Wait. Oh, there is a 75 that's hanging out up there. That is, we're too scrolled down. I can't get to it now, so I'm just going to read it. Chair 2 for you says, thank you. Learning so much from all your incredible research and sharing. Enjoy dinner. Thank you. I will. Don't send any more supers. That's the end of supers, guys. End of supers. I really appreciate it. One other 5 came in. Colby's best friend from CIA Vietnam defended Franklin scandal victim during trials. All right, cool. I'm stoked that I read that one. I should ask Nick Bryant about Colby as well. Nick Bryant did a bunch of work on the Franklin scandal, and I'd be very curious. I love that kind of lore of piecing together the old history of CIA and these old operations that come back around to haunt people and sometimes to flip you out of your canoe and drown you. So thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging out. Chat, how are you doing? Twitch chat, how are you doing? Sorry, I've been neglecting Twitch chat. Stacy's still in here gifting subs like a mad villain. Of course she is. Thanks for hanging out, Twitch chat, even while I'm not giving you guys the attention that I know we all know you deserve. If you guys are, you all know. If you're still here, you know. But YouTube chat is not on the screen. YouTube chat is in the YouTube, and Twitch chat is here on the screen hanging out. We go live on Twitch much more than we do on YouTube. I do Twitch streams all throughout the week. That's not what I'm looking for. And it's a ton of fun. We did a whole Twitch stream on the Maple Syrup Mafia yesterday. We do Twitch streams on live research on all sorts of topics. It's low key. It's a lot more fun. YouTube, I try to keep it more put together and prepared. But for now, I think I'm trying to put it together that we be done for the night. And I am starving, guys. And I got to go get some dinner. It's been real. My brain hurts. I've been literally flying around and doing things, doing podcasting since like noon today. So yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking, sharing, subscribing, talking, hanging, being tight. Let me pause this music and get real fucking serious here real quick. Listen, it's a crazy world out there, and there's some messed up shit going on out there, but you don't have to let that bring you down. You are a beacon of light. You have all the power in the world to change your life, to change your family's life, to change everyone around you's life by just changing yourself and being in charge of your own emotions and your own mental and spiritual reality, and taking good care of yourself and your people, and just being good vibes. Be good vibes, okay? Be good vibes, because the world is so full of negativity. It's so full of shit. It's so full of evil. You don't have to let that contaminate you, okay? So I know that we talk about evil shit a lot, but remember to drink water, eat good food, think healthy thoughts, love people, hug people, share and connect with people, and to get some good sleep at the end of it all. And if you do that, and you do that, and you do that, and I do that, and you do that, and you do that, and Gigi does that, and we all do that, then America would be better tomorrow. It would just take all of us, because we're all America and, everywhere else. But don't forget your part in the whole system. And just take care of your part today and tomorrow and the next day, right? And together, we'll all get a little better. So thanks for being here. Thanks for using your noggin. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for thinking. And whenever I find my mouse, I'll see you next time.
Conspiracy theories are entering a dangerous zone.
Information is the oxygen of the democracy.
There's so much evidence out there that even if less than 1% is true, that would be enough to collapse the current paradigm.